As far back as I can remember, I always wanted to be a gangster.
One of the worst performances of my career, and they never doubted it for a second.
We all go a little mad sometimes.
I believe there's a hero in all of us that keeps us honest, gives us strength, makes us noble.
You just gotta keep living, man. Livin.
Son of a bitch. He stole my life.
I love the smell of napalm in the morning.
Welcome back to the Shot by Shot podcast. Today, we have a much anticipated episode. We are going to be breaking down Ryan's all-time favorite trilogy, the one and only greatest Spider-Man trilogy, and one that defined the comic book genre, Sam Raimi's Spider-Mans, of course, we're talking about, because by far the best Spider-Man trilogy, as I think we all know by now, which was one of the really early pioneers of the comic book movie genre, where now, of course, we get, just a flood of these every year. But this really was one of the first films to kind of put them on the map and show that comic book movies could be better than could actually make money at the box office. So, Ryan, I know you have more of an appreciation for this film than any of us. Why don't you start us off on your all-time favorite trilogy?
Yeah, I love these movies more than anything really. I can't express how good these are. Well, I'm gonna try to in this episode, but yeah, Sam Raimi is one of my favorite just directors overall. Obviously the Evil Dead trilogy, then it's both of my favorite trilogies of all time probably. He's a director that comes from horror. His roots are in horror, and it's a genre where directors often work with low budgets, and they're doing a lot, finding creative ways to kind of make great things out of nothing. He dropped out of college, just made this really low budget movie with his friends, came up from nothing, kind of broke into Hollywood just basically from nothing. So yeah, I really like Sam Raimi. He's so good. And when you take them out of that environment where they are scraping to make something great with nothing, and you give them $140 million to make this Hollywood blockbuster, you just know they're going to use every cent of that budget and take it further and beyond of what's possible with other directors. And that's exactly what Sam Raimi does with this movie. He storyboards all of his shots, which leads to incredible visuals, which you don't often see in the genre anymore. But that allows him to have it can insert his flair that he's known for from his movies. He's a very unique style of directing that nobody really has. So yeah, you redefined the superhero genre, like you said, kind of set out the blueprint for how to do these kind of cape movies for the better or worst, maybe, for the future of cinema. He kind of redefined the genre.
Yeah, these films for me have just absolutely grown on me so much over time. And recently, I'd always liked them, but I'd never loved them up until kind of past 6 months, and now they're also my favorite superhero films ever, and one of my favorite trilogies as well. But yeah, Sam Raimi is just what defines these movies and just sets them apart from just any other superhero project in existence. The direction is levels above 95% of the superhero garbage that we're getting now and that we've gotten over the past 15 years. And this is just proof about what a director can do for a film and like the legacy of it. And I just cannot express how incredible these films are. And some people give them a bit too much disrespect, honestly, especially Spider-Man 3. But yeah, I know some people don't love these, but yeah, these just easily the greatest superhero films ever made for me. And that probably won't ever change unless Spider-Man 4 does get released. But yeah, we can only hope for that one day. Yeah,
I think you guys hit the nail on the head when you just talking about the main thing that separates these films from, a marketplace where there's just so many comic book movies these days is Sam Raimi at the end of the day. Because I feel like for people who aren't as into film, which is a lot of this film's audience, you go back and watch these films after years and years of MCU and DC movies and all this stuff, and they just feel so insanely different. And of course, the first thing everyone's going to jump to is the fact that it's in a contained world without the shared universe. But it's a lot more, I think, than just that. There really is so much that separates these movies from a lot of the comic book movies of the 2010s and into the 2020s. And that's just it. And it really comes from Sam Raimi, where it's one of the only uh, real comic book movie series where you have the director really put their signature on it and really kind of put their own creative style into the film. Like Ryan said, like Sam Raimi was capable of making Evil Dead on such a low budget, and then here's now making one of the biggest movies of the time. And even though it's obviously a completely different movie from Evil Dead, where this is like a very studio polished movie with like not trying to scare the audience as much and make it very family friendly and all that stuff and lighthearted, you still see those kind of elements that have been with Sam Raimi throughout his whole career, which is so great to see. And you don't really see from a lot of the other directors who have stepped into the genre after him, unfortunately. But yeah, I think, for me, like these are true childhood movies. Like these are some of the movies for me that taught me movies and really got me into just the craft of movies as a whole before I know anything about what a writer is or what a director or any of that stuff. It's just, being 4 years old, going to see this for the first time and having to leave the theater because your sister starts crying because she's scared of the Green Goblin. And then you have to go back to the movie. Like that's literally my first theater experience in my life that I can literally remember, because like I said, we had to leave crying. I wasn't, because my sister was crying and I wasn't happy about it.
No wonder he's scary.
Yeah. Then, well, in the second one, he puts an actual like horror scene in it, but we'll get to that. But which that one terrified me too. But yeah, no, the first one I didn't find scary. But yeah, like I said,
there's that one jump scare where he's like,
there's like 3 jump scares.
Old granny.
There's a couple. But yeah, I also just remember like the anticipation for these movies. Like I still remember like watching the trailers and like waiting for them to come out. Like I remember going to Toys R Us and it's all Sam Raimi Spider-Man shit. Like I remember the whole like cultural phenomenon of these movies. And honestly, the more and more of these become like kind of classics these days, just makes me feel like an old man, because I still remember like Spider-Man 2 was the first time I ever went to a movie on opening night. And I remember how exciting that was, like just being 6 years old and going to see a movie opening night for the first time. So yeah, I just remember the whole, these movies really transport me to like a connection to the earlier years of when I was younger in my childhood. And they really were just a part of like defining movies for me and getting me into the craft. But Ryan, I'm sure you feel very much the same way about them. And so what do you think are just some, before we get into the specific films, just like unifying elements throughout all three of these films that we see?
Really, I think, they're more than just comic book movies in my mind. I mean, it sounds pretentious, but they are like kind of real movies at times. They're more than like superheroes and action. There's real emotion and like real human like characteristics and themes and just actual movie stuff in this compared to what you usually see now. And I think Sam Raimi is like one of the most unique directors, maybe working about in general. Like the flair that he inserts into cinematography is insane at times. And I really think he was the perfect director to come into this project. Another movie that he done that did not get much focus or people watching it was Darkman from 10 years prior, and that pretty much set out the formula to create a superhero origin like 10 years before Spider-Man. Yeah, exactly. So he builds off of that. Even Elfman's theme is part of that is in there. Like all the elements that went into Spider-Man were stuff that he done at almost a decade before. So it's really crazy looking back at just the evolution of like his films leading up to Spider-Man. But yeah, just like I was saying, his general style as a director like brings this movie to life. Like he's known for like the very campy, like over the top editing, cinematography that's really made him stand out. And while he stood out in the horror genre before this, with Evil Dead, but it's a trademark that's kind of followed him throughout his whole career, even when he went on to work on with these big budget blockbusters like Spider-Man. Like there isn't really something that you see often anymore at all, especially in the superhero genre. And it feels like it's his own personal project at times, rather than this studio film that he's a for-hire director to come on and just do the story and kind of go through the motions. And that's one of the reasons why Spider-Man still stands out like almost 20 or over 20 years later. A lot of the actors said it feels like an independent picture, especially probably the first two. It doesn't feel like a movie that's made by Marvel. It feels like an auteur actually making his own individual project. So it doesn't feel like you're working on a big blockbuster. And I think that really is felt throughout most of the trilogy. I know there's some problems with studio interference with 3, and that comes with once you go into the big budgets and there's stakes with how much money you're making, because it kind of superhero movies were not the big thing that they were when Raimi started out. He really was one of the first people that kind of made it blow up, and Spider-Man was one of the biggest profits of any movie at the time, I think. And so the budgets just became bigger and bigger, and it kind of drags it away from that independent picture that they started to start with. But I think his flair is never lost throughout the films. They all feel like his projects, and because of the confidence and freedom that he's given in that, it feels larger than life, and it's much better than most films in the genre managed to do at all. Even Multiverse of Madness is one of the few films recently that feels like it's made by an actual director. So I think Raimi is very good at doing this kind of blockbuster stuff.
Yeah, I completely echo what you said. Just what makes these films so good is the way that he just grounds his characters. Peter Parker in this is just your average middle class guy. People will relate to this a lot, and that's just something that isn't apparent in almost any other superhero film. Even the other iterations of Spider-Man, you've just got kind of loads of kind of rich characters and kind of odd sequences, and they just don't make the characters that relatable. But this is completely different.
There was one Tom Holland Spider-Man scene where he has to sell his toys or something to make money, and they cut it, which really shows how Disney just really didn't understand the character at all.
It's so stupid, and I think the way like all the characters that are centered around all three films, their chemistry and their interactions are so well done, and it's just that balance of superhero and this really deep character life that he's going through, his personal life, his love life, everything. It's perfectly balanced, and Raimi just does such a ridiculously good job throughout all three films with this. And I know people are just going to continually slag off Spider-Man 3, even though it's still one of the greatest superhero films ever. But yeah, like you've been saying, Ryan, the direction across all three is just so consistent. Elfman's score is just unbelievable. Even like right from the off, there's shades of his Batman score in this score. There's kind of parts that are quite similar, and this is like just such a little thing. But even like the title credits, like you just don't get that now. The title credits for each thing is so cool, and the score over it. But yeah, it's just unlike any other superhero projects. I think for me, like the Batman is the only superhero project that I'd have rival, like stick in the middle of them in my rankings, and that's probably it. That's literally it for me. But yeah, I just love these films to bits, and such a good job, so consistent.
Yeah, like I said, I think I just love seeing how much like there's of Sam Raimi is in these projects as I get older. Because like I said, like when I first saw these movies, there was no consciousness of who Sam Raimi was or the films he had done before. But I think like there's just so much about these films that superhero movies as a genre have kind of lost in the assembly line, more factory approach. And so to me, I will say I do think this does feel like a studio film very much and does feel kind of like a Hollywood film, but that's not in a bad way. Like I think Jurassic Park feels like a Hollywood film very much, even though that's very much a distinctly Steven Spielberg movie. Just like this is very distinctly a Sam Raimi movie. And I feel like when we go back and visit these films now, it really shows us kind of what we've lost. And a lot of that is like just some of the appreciation for the image as a whole and like really using like visual storytelling and those things. Like the blend of CGI and practical effects in these films is so insanely well done, where it's because they're not having such an abundance of visual effects like today's films. The ones that are there, they spent so much time on and really perfecting those details that it's why people say like, oh, why does CGI look better like decades ago than it does now. And it's because they had time to really perfect it because it wasn't just the go-to, or they weren't over reliant on it. It was very much like, is the CGI right for is the CG, like, do we need the CGI or could we do this practically rather than just being a resort? But I think, a big strength is just how much these films understand the characters. And I don't know if a lot of people know this, but Sam Raimi actually had a brother who he drowned when he was a kid. I think like in his teenage years, like pretty young. And that brother was the one who got him into Spider-Man. So these movies are actually so insanely personal to him compared to, like I said, a lot of the hired gun approaches to the more recent films. Like this was so personal to Sam Raimi, and he really cared so much about like making this a great film that he would be proud of and like make it something for him. And he's a director who cares much about the audience. Everyone describes him as like a very collaborative director. And like I said, he just understands the core conflicts of the character. And for me, it's really about like Ryan said, it's the relatability of Spider-Man is the core of who his character is at the end of the day, where Superman, it's more about him being Superman. Batman, it's more about him being Batman. Peter Parker is just as much of an essential part to these as Spider-Man himself. And the way Peter Parker has just these small everyday conflicts that we all go through match with the bigger Spider-Man conflicts is what makes him so relatable, and how in his life the two are constantly at odds with each other, and the conflicts of Spider-Man are bleeding over to his personal life frequently. And I think the kind of more everyone knows the superhero identity has lost a lot of the kind of underlying irony and suspense and kind of insider element that the audience has, which I think a lot of the newer ones have lost that these films do so insanely well. And Spider-Man is just really just like such a cool character. Like Raimi loves to have him just swing around New York freely. And like we get so much of just him swinging through New York, which is the fun experience stuff that we want to see. And in addition to that, it's the films really embrace the voice of New York City as a whole. And obviously, I'm not the biggest fan of New York City as a city personally, but I do love how that's always been a core piece of the character of Spider-Man, where he existed in a very real world, and the comic artist actually used real locations in New York. And it's not this film. It's not like Marvel where it's the galaxy or the multiverse at stake. Like it's all isolated, not even to just the Earth, just one city and the conflicts of the city. And it just embraces that voice so much with so many just like random one-off characters from the city. And it really just has these little kind of atmospheric bits of the city, which is another thing that you don't see in these more mainstream films where everything is kind of so removed from reality. This Raimi really does ground the Peter Parker side of the story in such real reality. And of course the villain. Stan Lee said it's your villain should always seem more powerful than the hero. And Spider-Man, aside from maybe Batman, has the best villains of any superhero in the history of comic books. And I don't think it's even debatable unless you want to bring up Batman. And it really just kind of confines them, at least in the first two, one villain per movie, where there's always some form of personal connection between him and the villain, which I think makes it so much stronger. And they don't use any of his animal villains, which makes it kind of cool. Or they really kind of did a good job of selecting which villains to use. But yeah, there's just so much. And then, of course, like you both mentioned, Danny Elfman's score, like he just cooks on a level that no one else is doing. Marvel, of course, my biggest criticism is their neglect towards music, and Raimi does not do that. Elfman only wants to work with directors who care about the music, and Sam Raimi is totally one of those directors. The score is such a strength. It is kind of underscore sometimes. Like it's not. I don't think it's as good quite as his Batman score personally, but I think it's still like he totally cooks with this score. Like he does a great job here. But Ryan, what are your thoughts on just how the films just portray the character and capture the world as a whole?
Yeah, I think you hit it perfect on the head. Like Raimi loves these characters, and that's something people often overlook when, like, say, casting a director for a movie. Like I really like it really works so perfectly when they actually care about the characters. They have real passion for them, and this is something. Yeah, like you said, Raimi grew up with this character. He knows him back and front. He knows exactly how to kind of set out his arcs and the villains, and he's someone that you perfectly picked the villains because they always link to Peter Parker's like real life. they always linked the humanity of Peter Parker. It's never just a one-dimensional villain, and that's something that we were talking about Spider-Man 4 possibly happening. That's something that Raimi's he wouldn't do it if there wasn't like another character to kind of link him to in his journey or where he is in life. So it's always something that he's really put importance on. And yeah, and this is kind of the perfect origin story. It's pretty basic. It's pretty basic plot when you break it down. Like Peter gets his powers, learns the responsibility of being a hero. Meanwhile, Norman Osborn gets his powers on the other end of the spectrum and kind of uses them for evil. And then those two worlds kind of colliding with the relationships of Peter Parker. So yeah, the complexity kind of comes in with the characters, the very like character-driven approach that Raimi has. He understands the real humanity of these characters, and he brilliantly explores that throughout the films, all three of them, whilst dealing with kind of introducing the biggest superhero to the big screen, because again, this had not been done before. There was no blueprint of how to do this. He kind of laid it all out. And like you were saying, it's not only the main characters that are the highlights of these films. There's moments throughout the trilogy where there's side characters or characters of no importance that they all stand out, and that's kind of Raimi's brilliance of bringing the world alive. Whether that be like through the teacher that goes with them to the science museum that looks younger than them at times, or having his best friend Bruce Campbell announce Spider-Man to everybody.
I was waiting for you to bring that up.
Yeah,
Bruce Campbell, the GOAT.
One of the biggest strengths of the whole trilogy.
His roles are so funny.
He's so good in the first one as well. When he announces the Amazing Spider-Man.
Oh yeah, that one. I forgot it was that one. Yeah. Oh,
so he gives his best friend to announce the name of the biggest superhero to come to the big screen. It's very cool. Or like Alex was saying, New York feels like a character on its own. When they come to Spider-Man's rescue in this movie, or they'll have like interviews with people just in the street, kind of lettered throughout the movie, and I feel like that is something that's missing completely from these films. Like you do not see people in the cities or ever. They're often just empty playgrounds for the kind of heroes to kind of run about, and they feel pretty weightless. For like a Russo Brothers movie where the streets are just empty and everything's CGI. That's kind of just what the MCU is now. Apart from Multiverse of Madness, which did bring back the on-set locations. Even Madam Web this year, that was getting. I was praising that a bit just for actually.
I tell you what, there were some good shots in there.
There was practical stuff.
It looked good, like the on-location stuff, like you're saying. It actually looked good.
Yeah. It's sad that we're at a point where that is like well above the bar in the genre now, just to actually shoot real things on screen. But yeah, it really is the brilliance of a lot of the stuff Raimi done. He done real suits, like you said, real suits, real locations. Everything is done in front of the camera as possible as he can, and then he adds the CGI when it's necessary. And that's when it works brilliantly because it blends into the real elements and makes it feel real. So yeah, you have all these iconic characters that just show up for 2 seconds, and that's where a lot of the memes and stuff from the trilogy and all the moments that everybody remembers. You remember all these like nothing characters that just show up for 2 seconds. So yeah, Raimi's kind of flair and direction and stuff is like it's all over this. But yeah, he has a real confidence in his image. He's not afraid to get weird with it, and he knows how to really ground the character with emotion and the real life relatable things like we were saying. So that's really what makes these characters so good.
Yeah, the CGI, like you were saying, I cringe every time I see that screenshot from No Way Home of Flash Thompson, and it's standing in the street. It is the ugliest image known to man.
Yeah.
Oh my god, it looks so bad. But yeah, like you were saying, the casting is so good in this film. Apart from Terry, I think Kirsten Dunst is just absolutely perfect for this role. Just all the kind of real humanity kind of stuff, the different paths that everyone's taking, and it's all kind of weaving across, and relationships are going up and down. Grimly overhated as well. People seem to just hate on MJ when they watch these films, but
Extremely
it's like
overrated.
the worst take imaginable. Oh, Alex, you disagree?
Yeah, I'll get into that later. I actually think the MJ stuff, it's not the Kirsten Dunst as much as it is the writing. It's by far the biggest flaw of the trilogy. Like, I think those scenes are horrible.
You're crazy, man. You're
I have so
absolutely
many
crazy.
criticisms, honestly, about those scenes.
They're so good.
Honestly, you know what? You know what? Now's a good time. Now's a good time for my hot take. I have an insane hot take right now. And I hope that both of you know I mean this with absolute sincerity from the bottom of my heart. The Love and MJ scenes of this trilogy are genuinely inferior to Attack of the Clones. I just rewatched both in theaters, and from the time I was 6 to now, the Attack of the Clones romance is genuinely better because the dialogue sucks in both of them, but at least you have one of the best love. At least you have one of the best love themes of all time with Attack of the Clones. This is just, there's no score to get me to care. It's just horrible. You think I hunch, dude. Shut the fuck up.
There is
You need
scores.
help. You need help, my friend.
I mean that from the bottom of my heart. I care more about the romance as a kid, and I care more about it now after just rewatching them back to back in theaters. Attack of the Clones romance is 100% better than MJ and Peter. I was gonna say that.
Natalie Portman noncing up an 8-year-old for 10 years is better than the romance of Mary Jane and Peter Parker.
That is so. Oh,
what are you talking about,
dude? It has a good score to back it up. I can listen to one of the greatest.
The dialogue in Attack of the Clones is horrific, man.
The MJ and Peter score are not the most iconic.
Not bad. The dialogue in these films are not bad, especially between those two.
It's not bad. It's horrible. It's the corny shit.
No, it's not.
It's not.
These are my favorite scenes.
I know.
Those
I'm not
scenes
going
are
to
so
show
good.
Those are your favorite scenes. I can't help you. I was trying not to shit on your favorite movie too much, but clearly that's just illness.
I will stand on the hill that get rid of the the Spider-Man stuff, the action. These are like great romance dramas.
Oh
yeah, they are. They are.
I love.
They are great.
I didn't realize that there was this much.
No, I would defend. I would defend those scenes.
Is so good.
No, listen, I watch all of them and I'm like, these movies are so perfect, just except for like those. In some movies, like when I'm taking notes and I'm like, my brain can't keep up with, my pen can't keep up with like my thoughts. I'll pick like a weaker scene to catch up on them. And it was the point by 3. I'm like, all right, MJ scene, time to catch up on notes. Because they're just
those
so,
are the most thematically filled scenes, though.
Huge flaw in the movie is those scenes are, there's bad dialogue, like there's bad dialogue written, like they're bad on the page, but then the delivery is just, it's like even worse. Like they're bad on the page and executed even worse. Like those scenes are so horrible. I don't know how you are defending them right now.
Right. So right. Spider-Man is 20 years old now. So like the landscape of like female characters has changed a lot. Like they were treated a lot differently 20 years ago. And I will admit that MJ is definitely used too much as the kind of damsel in distress too many times, especially in the third one. They probably should have stopped at that point. Because she wasn't meant to be the damsel in distress initially. It was like changed to that. However, she is far more complex than the people give credit for. I think there's
it's the fact that people blame her in their relationship. That's the bad thing.
It's a
I
red
don't blame
flag.
Kirsten Dunst. I blame the writers.
No.
But you
People
generally
blame
think the characters
MJ's
in the
character
wrong.
for ruining their relationship. It is Peter is the one who ruins their relationship.
I mean, to be fair, she was disloyal to every guy she was with in the entire trilogy.
No.
Peter literally kisses some other girl right in front of her in the third one.
No, yeah, all right.
What are you
3, I'll
talking
give you
about?
that. I'll give you that. In Spider-Man 3, it's totally valid. Like on her end, I'll give you that 100%. Which I don't care. This is far from the biggest
so
flaw
many
in her
men
life.
around her just got like got so many conflicts going on. I don't blame her.
But yeah, let's sort this out. Let's explain to Alex, right? Because I love these scenes. Not many blockbusters will have the confidence to kind of slow down things and take 5 minutes to explore characters like these. These are very like intimate scenes. Like they're very character focused, away from all the action and superhero stuff. And especially in the first one, I think MJ's character is great because she does not have a supportive person in her life. Her father's very abusive to her, and that's something that carries along the whole trilogy. She's very insecure about the kind of trauma that her fathers gave her, and she never feels worthy after that. And we constantly see this with Peter, like he's the only person that really is supportive of her. And I adore that scene in the backyard that you were slandering. MJ gets a lot of unwarranted flack for these, and I really love the romance. Like the acting from Kirsten Dunst is so good. The look on her face when Toby doesn't, like, when she expresses her wishes of being on a, like, in plays, and he doesn't put her down. He's the first guy to actually appreciate and kind of understand and really like support her dreams. And the look on her face when she actually finds out that he's not like putting her down, and he's the only guy in her life that really does that. And Toby's such a goofy guy that it's like so funny, his face, and his acting is so underappreciated, but like the emotion that he shows in his face is so great. And he's such like a nerdy guy that like it's so funny at times. And later on, like her dream that isn't like going as she wants, and she's embarrassed to tell him that her dream isn't going well. Like that scene when she walks out the cafe and they meet in the street, and Pierre always knows like the right thing to say to her, and it's clear that things aren't going well with Harry. You say that she cheats on. I'm gonna guess you say she cheats on Harry, but she does not. Things are not going well with Harry. There's also that scene later on where he doesn't defend her at Thanksgiving dinner. Another man in her life that will not defend her. So Harry's not good to her. And Flash at the start. I mean, Flash is Flash, so that's not really a good point to bring up. But yeah, she's kind of just in love with Peter, and I think there's another scene when I know you brought this up with the hospital scene where Peter kind of basically expresses his love for her in the hospital after Aunt May has been attacked. And that is really a moment where MJ starts to like kind of fall in love with Peter. I think like she's telling him about her crush on Spiderman, and right before that, like I think she kind of sees him as the friend at that point, and Peter kind of like expresses all his love for her, and all these emotions and love in that moment. And Kirsten Dunst's acting is amazing in that scene, I think. But Raimi puts so much focus on the characters here that really makes the scenes. And then that's when Harry walks in on them holding hands, which is important for the rest of the trilogy. But yeah, I really like the scenes. I don't think there's like Kirsten Dunst does not cheat on anybody. It's not like she doesn't do anything near as bad as what Toby does in the first one.
Yeah, I'm not. I don't. That's not like my issue with the character. Like that's just a small thing that got brought up. Like that's such an insanely like minor thing. I'm more saying like that. Just the dialogue is atrocious. And it's like I said, I understand you.
You're a dialogue hater.
Listen, if there's any movie that justifies my hatred for dialogue, it's these fucking movies with these love scenes. All right. First off, I understand your respect for the fact that there's like a superhero movie would slow down and have an intimate scene. I get all that. The problem is the execution is complete dog shit. I just think that it's, dude. You can't tell me, dude. He's literally like, I hunch, like it's just it's so corny. Punch me, I know Oscar was in punch me, I bleed. Like
that's such a good line. That is such
atrocious style.
It's not. It's such a good. That line is so good because it's the time where he's gotten away with the suit and he proves he can actually be hurt. He's actually human. He's a human character, not just a superhero. It's such a good line.
And it's such a.
What are you talking
another
about?
Movie, you would so be criticizing this.
No, I wouldn't.
He's a nerdy guy. This is like how you expect Peter Parker to act.
He doesn't need to like. I was
it's
like,
he's
also supportive of MJ without saying it like a complete nerd, like on that level. Not nerd, just like
in that scene, he is trying to be poetic because Doc Ock had like told him to use poetry to win his love.
The one you're talking.
No, that's part two. The Punch Me, I believe, is part two.
Yeah, no, I'm actually referring to when in the hospital scene when you said he was supportive of her, which is true. Like from a writing decision standpoint, the delivery is just so corny. I'm sorry, it's so corny.
The emotion on their faces is so good. Like
there's some Kirsten Dunst does have some good facial emotion ones. All right, hold up. Let me ask both of you this: were either of you fans of the comic or the cartoon?
The cartoon, I was.
Dude, this is so not MJ's character. Like, it's also insanely like such a. It's so not accurate to her character in the comics or the animated series, which is just the comics animated. But it's
Womp womp.
MJ is not like this like girl next door. Like she's like lives next door, but it's not like they mix Gwen Stacy elements into her. Like she has like she's so much more personality in the cartoon and comics is what I'm getting at. Like she's totally
but shit. The only time I remember her showing up in the cartoons is when it gets like very supernatural and like.
No, she's in like most.
Do you prefer the MJ in the MCU as Dande's the MJ?
I mean, that's like just not like even trying to attempt being anything like the cartoon. Like it's literally just the name. It's completely like.
Why does it have to be the cartoon? Why can't it be something else?
I'm saying the cartoon because it's the. I get that it could be something else, but what else that they chose was worse. Like she has so much more personality in the comics and the cartoons than she does. Like she actually makes like real decisions and like has her own like character in those. Like here she feels like
have her own character in these films.
There's like her career element for sure, but it feels like her whole character is just revolves around elevating like Peter's arc. Like it feels like she's only there to support Peter's arc, where like she has such a more fleshed out and multi-dimensional character in the comic / cartoon. Like here, her whole character is just damsel in distress and like falling in love with Peter versus like not with Peter. Like that's her whole character, I feel like. Whereas she has like she just has no personality. Like what's her personality in these movies? Silence.
Like I was saying, like the father element and stuff like that we see in the first one. I think she's definitely the best in the part one, and she has a lot of trauma going out for the whole trilogy.
Yeah, I guess
I don't agree that. Sorry, go ahead.
I just don't think it comes across the trauma that well. Like I think after the first scene, it really is like kind of. I know they bring it up like again briefly, but I feel like it's never like felt.
I mean, I guess you can't. I'm not going to be able to convince you that the dialogue isn't cringy if you think that. Yeah, I really love it.
I'll give me Padme over MJ any day of the week.
The score, and the emotional like romance scenes are good in this as well.
Yeah, see, in some of them, like in two, it definitely. I think the MJ scenes are a lot better in 2. Like, I'm definitely think they're a lot worse in 1, but yeah, I don't think those are the best moments of the score for the most part. There's a few exceptions.
Yeah.
But you did mention Bruce Campbell, who I think is one of the biggest strengths of the trilogy. I just love it when he shows up, and I love watching the BTS interviews anytime I love how he's barely in the movie and they include him in all the press stuff. So he's the most entertaining one.
Yeah, he always brings up how Sam Raimi used to like throw things at him in this, and I think he carried that over to the trilogy as well. He would always just throw stuff at Peter. Of Tobey Maguire and all the cast.
Honestly, let's talk about the best character in the trilogy, which I don't think anyone will disagree with me on. Undoubtedly the best character. J. Jonah Jameson, played by J.K. Simmons. Now we're going to talk about like personality, comic accuracy, and just electric on screen and great dialogue. J.K. Simmons is perfect across the board in everything about him. Like, he's always got like a billion things on his mind. He speaks like super rhythmically, like a Howard Hawks movie. Like there's always like this, like what he's doing before Peter walks in, like little like comedic bits that I just love. So
he's just so funny.
He's so good.
Dying of laugh every time. That scene in is it Spider-Man 2, I think, where he has a Spider-Man suit up on his wall and like he switches like tone like in a couple of seconds. Mm-hmm. Oh, I love Spider-Man. I was like, oh, I hate him. It's so funny. And then it's just
the behind the scenes scene of Spider-Man 2 where he gets in the suit and jumps about.
So, fun fact, Stan Lee said if he were to be in the movie, the character he would have wanted to play was J. Jonah Jameson. Which I'm not saying I think he would have been a good J. Jonah Jameson because he seems like the nicest guy in the world. But that's funny that even he loved the character that much too.
Yeah.
His delivery of fired every 5 seconds is so funny. It's so well done.
And it goes to show because they kept him in the MCU, so like he was like a character that you just couldn't replace.
Yeah, it's
No, you
it's
can't.
like unreal casting is just so perfect. And then in Spider-Man V, the look on the face that he has when Peter's got sat in his chair and got his legs up on the desk, his face is so funny. His dialogue is hilarious. And yeah, it just kills me every single time.
Yeah, I think it's probably
Although
the best casting in comic book movie history.
I don't agree that he's the best character, though. I would still give that to Peter Parker.
I mean,
particularly Tobey Maguire's
That's fair,
interpretation.
but he steals every scene that he's in.
It does.
It's just crazy. He's so entertaining as a character. It's ridiculous.
But I do think that, I mean, there's always arguments about which Spider-Man's the best, and I think it's ridiculous even to argue that it's not Tobey Maguire. Sam Raimi fought to have him in the role. He wasn't seen as an actor that could play this like action hero required for the role. But I think Raimi just understood the character so much, and I know you're dissing his dialogue, but that is Tobey Maguire, or that is Peter Parker, the
only with
the
him.
guy that.
Only
you're dissing his.
Oh no, I'm just the
yeah,
dialogue 100%.
Crazy man.
I think Tobey plays him perfectly.
Yes. The list is Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield, and then Tom Holland way down here. I can never fathom how people think Tom is the best.
You just don't care about the character if you have Tom at your best.
No, I mean, actually, it is like it is valid. I think like Tobey's, of course, my Spider-Man. He's the Spider-Man I grew up with, but like I have one big issue with the Spider-Man, and that's that he doesn't capture like the wisecracking, like funny in the suit. That is such a iconic part of the character. Is like he's always cracking jokes. He never shuts up, and like Tom embodies that perfectly. Obviously, there's like the age thing. Like I never even like thought about it as a kid, but like I watched this with like one of my cousins who was like 5 or 6 at the time. And first scene, he's like, "Why are there a bunch of grown-ups on the bus?" But I mean, I don't really care. Like as a kid,
that was just the thing back then that they would never cast people in their actual age, and that's something that's always brought up. But like, sure, the guy. I mean, I don't think they look that different. Like Toby's meant to be like. I mean, he's 18 at the start and then like 19, 20 later on into it. So I really don't think he looks that far off the age. But it's really just something that was the norm back then. And I think it's an aspect that when we do look back, people look older in the 2000s anyway. Like in every aspect of life, like not just movies.
Yeah.
That teacher that you brought up at the beginning of the first one is so funny. It's when he's telling them off, it's just really unserious because he looks like 5 years younger than them.
Now, all honesty, though, like I think Tom is probably the most comic accurate Spider-Man. I think, or Peter Parker. I just don't think he's the best written. I don't think he's the best written, but I think
no, the writing is horrible.
It's awful.
The writing is horrible. The writing for Tom Holland Spider-Man,
and the suits are disgusting as well.
Yeah, like the suits suck, like the scripts aren't as good, but I do think he is a very good Spider-Man. I think he's definitely better than Andrew Garfield.
I think Garfield's the best in No Way Home. Like even better than Tobey in that movie.
Yeah.
But I'd definitely still have Tobey above them. There's some moments with Tobey quips. There's like the scene when Doc Ock's stealing the bank and he like screams like "Here's your change" and throws the money bag back at him. Or there's the Bonesaw McGraw wrestling match. I mean, the thing that he says to him hasn't aged the best about he's still like making jokes about him. So yeah, I think he's still pretty good in that. And I think, I mean, the action and the writing about his actual Spider-Man scenes are clear of Tom Holland's.
Far superior. I think we're all in agreement there. That all of that's far superior. It's just the actual performance. I agree. Like Tobey has his moments, but like the Spider-Man character, like going back to like the comics and the cartoons, are like is such like a wisecracking, always making a joke, and that's the one that's definitely Tobey's biggest weakness. And probably I think just even when he says them, like Garfield and Holland are a lot better at delivering those than Tobey was. But that's really the only major flaw. Like he's a great Peter Parker, of course.
Yeah, I just think a lot of Tom's just comes off as MCU humor. It doesn't work for me. Garfield, I can understand the humor because I quite like that. But yeah, Tom's
was good at that.
can't really speak highly for, honestly.
Yeah, I think the
Mm.
MCU kind of overdid the humor, which by the time we got to Tom Spider-Man, it was like played out. But I think like if that had been one of the first MCU movies, we wouldn't have complained. Like it would feel a lot different because I think it's accurate to his character. The problem is they made that every character. But Garfield was good at it. I think Garfield did this really well. I just don't like him as Peter Parker.
He's great Spider-Man, Garfield.
Yeah, I don't mind his movies, but they are kind of just remakes of this. Even his suit, the TASM 2 suit, is basically just trying to remake Tobey's suit.
Still looks cool though.
Yeah, no, well, it looks cool because it's basically just as Tobey's suit, but it does look cool.
The score in the TASM films are both great. That's because it's Zimmer.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, Zimmer only did
touch.
two. I think James Horner did one. Pretty sure.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, and it cooks. Like you get that his kind of intro music in 2 is so great.
Yeah, I think one's awful, but we're not here to talk about the Andrew Garfields or the Tom Hollands. We're here to talk about the best Spider-Man movies. So I think we should get into the first Spider-Man film. So Ryan, why don't you start us off on Spider-Man 1?
Yeah, like I said, this is the perfect origin. I think really what this movie's about is Peter learning the responsibility of taking on that role of Spider-Man and the things that he has to sacrifice for it. And at first, obviously, it's the classic Spider-Man story that we've known to kind of learn from these movies. He doesn't take Uncle Ben's advice. He uses his powers for selfishness. At the start, we have the big wrestling match where he wants to use his powers to win money for a car to impress Mary Jane, which ultimately leads to his uncle's death, which everybody knows that is the classic Spider-Man kind of story, because he doesn't stop the robbery. And I think it's the arc, particularly in this one, is really good. I love the way it wraps up in the final fight with Norman. He's kind of the father figure in his life in this movie. He's been living in the apartment, probably paid by him, for him and Harry, and their families meet for Thanksgiving and stuff. So it's a big betrayal when he finds out that he's the Green Goblin, and those final words like kind of putting a kind of strain on the relationships in the movie when he tells him not to tell Harry that he's Green Goblin. I think he's really the biggest secret of his life. Other than Spider-Man, kind of keeping that against his best friend, and that really leads to the kind of conflicts in the rest of the movies. But yeah, I think Peter's arc is amazing in this movie. We already talked about Mary Jane. I love those scenes as well. I think the romance is some of the best stuff, like we said, but we're not going back into that. We'll get back into an argument. The Defoe villain, I think he's on my. I think I'd have him second over Doc Ock and Spider-Man 2. But like we were saying, all these villains are attached to Peter in some way. They aren't one-dimensional villains. They have like real elements that are connected to him in ways to his personal life. And Defoe plays like I said, that father figure that's kind of stretched to the end of his work, and he's forced to go down this path or lose kind of his livelihood. And it's a lot more campy in this very first one because he's taken like I think in the comics it's Super Serum, so it's like Captain America. I think that's it. But so it's kind of like in this one, it's just kind of his serum that they're working on, and he turns into this villain. But yeah, Goblin's like a great vessel to kind of teach him that great power comes great responsibility that Uncle Ben tells him, because Norman being this kind of surrogate father to him, being so close to his family, kind of teaches him the responsibility of being Spider-Man and the danger that it puts his loved ones in. And he's also kind of a mirror to Peter, because that's kind of like what the kind of path he could go down to if he wasn't raised properly by his aunt and uncle, if he didn't take on the responsibility of the power. And the villains were just so different back then. Like, he's so ruthless. He's straight up killing people. He's throwing bombs. I love the scene when he throws the bomb at the
they just disappear.
Like the board.
Yeah, but they turn into skeletons. And it's like Sam Raimi's. Oh, it's so good. He'll blow up buildings. He'll literally threaten the life of school kids. Like, these are ruthless characters compared to a lot of the villains that you get now, that are quite one-dimensional. And I think Defoe plays such a deranged character, and he's so perfect for it because he's a physical actor, and he really acts with every ounce of his body, and it's maybe a shame that they couldn't get his face more on show like they did in No Way Home, because he's such a scary guy when he wants to be. Just his normal face is really creepy, and he didn't really need the mask. But this allows him to play kind of two characters, Norman Osborn and basically losing his mind, and then the Green Goblin, who's like a full-on psychopath. But physically, he makes them two distinct, and I mean, he's such a great physical actor. And there's just such this like specific way that the foe moves that nobody else can do it. I really think there's nobody like him. He's one of my favorite actors just ever in general. He's just a real unique guy, and his screen presence is great. There's really nobody like him, and he wanted to do all these stunts on this project because he knew the stunt guys wouldn't be able to replicate like the way he moves and acts. So yeah, he's just a really cool guy that I think even in No Way Home he wanted to keep doing stunts even at the age that he's at. So yeah, he's just a really cool actor.
Yeah, I absolutely love this film. For me, easily greatest superhero origin story put to film. I know kind of now they're kind of used less because we know a lot about the characters and people just don't really bother with it. But this is the perfect Spider-Man origin story for me. Just right from the off, everything hits. Is so enjoyable, man. Just the score, all the character relations, and Raimi's direction is there. Some of the transitions and the dissolves in this film are so good. That kind of the one transition where it's the scene where you first kind of see Green Goblin in action, where he like destroys that military base, like the explosions, and like throws up, and it's like the graduation.
Oh, it's so good. Yeah,
it's so good. And just all like the really quick cuts and the flashes back and forth, I think works so well together. And is even the little things when he first climbs the wall, like the razors on his, like you see on his skin, just make my shin
it's like body horror.
So much because it's like a really really kind of bad thing to think about because it was just like the pain of it almost. But yeah, that kind of first spider sense scene in the high school where he's kind of got that freeze of time and it kind of goes around everywhere is so cool. And one of my just favorite techniques used throughout all these films, just the lens reflection shots, which are like such a sight to behold. That I love them so much. And just the the scene where Aunt May's house blows up never makes me want to laugh out loud. Is such a funny shot. Just the way she kind of falls forward and reacts to the explosion behind her is
yeah, she's like praying, and then this like devil flies through the window.
It gets me every time. And like you were saying, the fights are so brutal. You're just punching. You kind of got the contained in these kind of single locations, and they're just punching each other through walls. And one of the best shots of the film is right at the end where he throws that bomb into his face, and you see the shot of the reflection through the eye and his head like turning as it explodes in front of him is absolutely gorgeous. But yeah, like you were saying, William Dafoe is so perfect for this role, and one of my favorite kind of villain performances of all time. Honestly, is such an unbelievable film, and just the perfect start to a kind of a Spider-Man trilogy and him as a character. But yeah, absolutely adore this film. But yeah, Alex.
Yeah, this is my favorite of the trilogy, and I understand like two is like a better movie on pretty much every level. Like I just can't deny like it's a much better movie. The only thing one really has that is above two for me is just the nostalgia factor, that like I'm way more nostalgic to this movie than I am to Spider-Man 2, because I'm an old man. I remember a world where Spider-Man 2 did not exist. And I still remember like when this was the only movie. And yeah, I think it. So real quick, what does Scorsese say about Marvel movies?
It's not cinema.
Scorsese is on record saying he likes these movies.
Yes.
And I think
Roger Ebert gave them like perfect scores as well. Just saying.
Yeah, I think the New York element's probably a big part of why he likes them. But like this is a film that I started a lot more times than I finished, because like I grew up with it. So it's like when you're a kid, you put them on, You either get distracted or you fall asleep. So I've seen the beginning so many more times than I've seen the end. But it really is like just it's just such a fun film every time I watch it. Like the flaws are totally forgiven and overlooked. Like I said, like
What flaws?
There's you know what flaws I'm talking about. We don't need to have a same thing.
Absolutely no clue what you're talking about, mate.
But I mean, at the end of the day, like I don't think this script leaves like me with a lot to like pick up on rewatches. But like for a Spider-Man movie, it's perfect. Like it understands it's perfect for what it needs to be. Like it's simple, it's clear, it's direct. It's not like trying to really express anything. It's not like layered and complex. It's not what it needs to be. Like this is a movie for families. Comic books are not always like are a lot of times like more simple, straightforward stories. You always know what the characters want. You know what the obstacle is. That's always clear. And like Ryan said, the arc is so strong in this one. Like this truly understands the character in a way that I think the Andrew Garfield movies do a terrible job with, where in my opinion, the core of the Spider-Man character is about two things. It's about one, like just the relatability of Peter Parker, and it's all about the sacrifice. And it's about the character's needs versus the character's wants, and just the sacrifice of what he wants as Peter Parker for the need of being Spider-Man, and all due to Uncle Ben's message, I think is the core. And like I get why the Tom Holland movies didn't want to go to the Uncle Ben, because it just would feel repetitive. But at the same time, we have a generation of kids who are learning about the character from the new movies and maybe haven't seen the older ones. And yeah, I think the Uncle Ben is so essential to the character of Spider-Man and his motivations. And so yeah, like what the very first, before we even see Peter, the first real like shot of the film is MJ. And because MJ is obviously what Peter wants. Like, even though I've criticisms about the interactions and the specific writing, her element in the story is insane. She's an insanely essential part of the script. And like, of course, she's what Peter wants the entire film. Basically, then we spend the entire film of him going through obstacles, like making strong character decisions to get to the final place where he ends up in. And the script really has him make tough decisions. Like he makes the wrong decision to let the guy go. And he makes the decision to kind of be a dick to Uncle Ben. And then he decides, and of course, the ultimate tough decision at the end of who to save, MJ versus the trolley car. And in the end, after all of this journey of the character, he finally can have what he wants, but he chooses to not get what he wants because he knows Uncle Ben's message of being Spider-Man essentially is what he needs, and that's what's more important. And I think that element of the sacrifice and the one versus need is the biggest strength to this whole trilogy. It's also what I don't like about the Garfield films, because I don't feel like the Garfield films have that same sense of sacrifice. And so I think like this, like I said, this film just understands the character of Spider-Man really well. And I think, he obviously learns lessons about putting his loved ones in danger, sacrifice, all of that stuff, but so many small practical conflicts at the same time. Like his motivation for the decision to go to the cage match, which is just, that seems so 2000s, it's crazy, but also gives us a practical way for like the elaborate names and stuff like that, and the costumes, like makes it actually like realistic. But yeah, there's so many small practical conflicts at the end of the day, and like smaller motivations, objectives, that I think like it separates him from a lot of the other superheroes, and especially a lot of the more recent superhero films. And then the love triangles, it does work pretty well. And another thing I love is that when a loved one dies in this film, whether it's Peter or Harry, it's really felt, and it's felt for like a long period of time. And like we really sit there with the aftermath of it, which another thing, I know I feel like it's repetitive. We're just shitting on all the new ones, but it really, you don't feel that same sense of loss from the loved ones when in a lot of the newer ones compared to these films. Quick thing about MJ. Why does MJ have goblin colors on the entire film? She wears green and purple so much. I don't get why she is goblin. Like I get the compliments her red hair well, but at the same time, it's like they have her in goblin colors the whole film. Or not the whole
I never
film.
realized that. Interesting.
She wears green a lot of the film. Her introduction's purple shirt, green jacket.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It was just I never understood. It just honestly, so many of these images are just deeply ingrained in my mind, like the DNA going to Spider-Man. or like when his hands are becoming like the spider, like they're just so deeply ingrained in my memory because like I was 4 years old when I first saw this movie and saw it 100 times.
I wasn't even born.
What's up?
I wasn't even born.
Young buck.
Yeah,
I don't
didn't
think
see.
I didn't see Spider-Man in cinemas. I don't think Spider-Man 2 was the Spider-Man 2 and 3 was the ones I've seen. At least I have memories of seeing.
I haven't seen a single one in cinema.
Well, I'll say this: Spider-Man 1, I don't really distinctly remember the movie. I more remember leaving the movie than I do the movie from seeing that in theaters. But yeah, it was. Of course, I've seen it 100 times. I love the Goblin. Like he's one of my favorite villains all around between comics, cartoons, and the movie. Like the glider's awesome. Like the whole parade sequence is awesome. Like he's just the glider makes him such a cool villain. And this film really takes its time with the villain. Like a lot of like nowadays, it's like, all right, you got to have the story fully moving forward 30 minutes into it, maybe even earlier. Where like he really isn't the Goblin until the second half of the movie. It really takes its time with him. The only major flaw I have is the suit because like Ryan said, he has such an expressive face, Willem Dafoe, and the Goblin does have like an expressive face that's so much like Dafoe in the cartoon and comics. So why would they not like? I don't know why they chose to hide it. Someone said it was because
they tried to make a practical like face they could move, but it was too scary. So they had to just switch up and go to the static mask.
Yeah, I think that was a decision that didn't age well. But I think also I don't like how they got rid of the purple. Like the suit's awesome in the design, but like the purple and green are just the colors work so nicely together. And
yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, I just wish that like I just think like the Goblin could have been so much cooler if they added the purple back and the hood as well, which I do like that they brought that part of it back in No Way Home. But oh yeah, also they do a great job with like because in the comics the Goblin was the first character to know Peter's identity, and this is the only film where the villain in the trilogy where the villain really knows Peter's identity. Like Doc Ock doesn't find out until the very end when Peter tells him. Eddie Brock doesn't find out till the third act, and Flip Marko, same thing as Doc Ock. So I like how they took that part from the comics and made it personal in that way.
I think you hit the nail on the head with the things about sacrifice, and another thing that I think is core to the character is about the normal guy coming into these like larger than life things that I don't think I do think TASM 2 is quite good with the sacrifice. Because he has to give up Gwen Stacy. But the thing that they never got right was the fact that Peter Parker is just this ordinary guy. It could be anybody that gets the powers. Whereas in TASM, he was destined to become Spider-Man. And that is one of my biggest like things that I hate about those movies. It's his DNA is like only him could have become Spider-Man. So that is another very important thing about the character Spider-Man. But yeah, just like a couple other stuff that you were saying, like the montage of the cars, of him looking at cars to impress MJ, like you were saying, was very 2000s. I think that's just the moments where like Sam Raimi's style kind of really shows through, and I love that like kind of visual storytelling so much. Like he's kind of like his inner thoughts of Peter wanting money and how he's going to impress MJ and all those things. Like it's done without dialogue, and I really appreciate that. So I think that's one of the things that Sam got so right. Again, just he's like this like working class kid that really drives the story forward as he needs the money. Yeah, and then the car, not being able to afford the car, leads him to the match where he like makes the mistakes that leads to Uncle Ben dying and learning about how to use his powers and the responsibility all about it. But one of the things that I really love about these movies is the horror moments that Sam Raimi always brings through to them. Like you were saying, like the Goblin, he's so scary. I was terrified of him as a kid as well. There's like 3 jump scares. There's one Osborn like wakes up from the first time he turns into the Goblin that always gets me no matter how many times I watch the movie. And there's another one when Toby's sleeping after Aunt May's attacked. And I think it's meant to be like a nightmare, but it's like the Green Goblin like jumps forward into the screen, and it's such a good jump scare. There's also the burning building moment where he kind of tricks Spider-Man into it. I think that's some great horror moments in there. Just coming from the horror genre in general kind of brings all these like big importance on doing things practically, like Alex was saying earlier, and frankly, it's made in a time where movies were in general kind of more lenient on using or CGI all the time. And just the stunts, the webbing, the infamous food tray catch in the hall that said took him like 50 times to do it because they actually tried to catch all the food. Just all these small things that kind of lead up to the film, like kind of more feeling more real. Like even the whole trilogy being shot in film is something that you never like dream of with a comic book movie now, and it makes the movies look so good and hold up even today. And I think you mentioned it earlier, Oscar, like the things coming out of his fingers so that he can climb walls and stuff. Like it's some great body horror
every single time I watch it.
Yeah, and I love the fact that he's like organically makes webs. I think it's weird that like it wasn't even part of his character, like canonically, like to even happen in that the fact that he becomes a spider, because I know some people like that he's like really smart and makes the webbing by himself. But I think that's almost too unrealistic, even though he is very smart in these movies. I do
Agree.
like the fact that it just comes as part of his powers.
It makes it more unrelatable doing it the other way that the Andrew and Tom ones do it. It's much better this way.
Yeah, for sure. And just
I kinda
even
like
when it does actually. Go
I
ahead.
don't know. I don't really mind one way or the other, but if I got a preference, I guess just because I'm such a big fan of the animated series and some of like I wasn't an avid comic reader. I read some. I'm not like a true comic fan, but I was a big animated series fan. So I do kind of have a preference of the webs that he makes versus the organic, but it's not a change that I mind.
Yeah, I was a big fan of the animated series, but it wasn't something that I ever like thought about, like the webbing in that. I love the body horror in the animated series as well. There's that episode when he gets the extra arms. That was always my favorite. So there's a lot of horror, like body horror stuff, all kind of rooted in the character that I think he really brings through here. When he actually does go to the visual effects, though, I think there's some great moments here. That first swing, kind of blending the actual practical Tobey Maguire standing and like turning into the CGI character. I think it's revolutionary for the time. And that first swing is still one of the best kind of swinging scenes just in Spider-Man in general. I think it's a solid blend of the practical and the CGI. And it's just when he's very like new to the swinging. I think that's especially when it's very interesting. And it's the actual camera moving for real. It's not all just fake. Like there's as much on front of the camera as there can be, so it makes it feel more realistic. All the swinging scenes feel tangible and as real as possible because Raimi tries to just do his best and not overusing the CGI like you were saying, and it makes it still stand up today. Still, there's the shot where it's the dummy where
I was just about to say the
Dunst.
shot where you can see the dummy.
Yeah,
It's funny.
people always bring that up, but I mean, did you ever notice that? Like, I'd never noticed that, like, when I was younger.
No,
Until, like,
I notice it every time
online.
now that's been brought up.
Yeah.
It's still funny though.
I mean, yeah, because I've just seen it so many times, but like it's not something I noticed in like the first 20 watches. So
Yeah,
oh
exactly.
yeah, definitely.
it's not till it's not till I just seen it so many times that I start noticing little things like that where like it definitely like passed the eye test for 10 plus watches, childhood watches, but still.
Yeah. And then just finally the score. We all talked about Danny Elfman's iconic score. I think it's probably my favorite score of all time, never mind comic book movies. I think just the fact that he done the Batman and the Spider-Man score is just ridiculous. And I miss, Oscar, you mentioned it earlier, that the credit scenes, like movies just don't even have intro scenes at all basically anymore. And I think these even had a practical use to them because especially in the sequels it would kind of recap the movies before and kind of give there was a purpose to them now. They would actually recap the big moments for people that maybe weren't fully familiar with the stuff that had happened or had forgotten about them. So on top of being cool, they were there for a reason. And there's so many moments where the score works so well. I think probably the highlight in this movie is this like kind of switch up of the open score when Uncle Ben dies. It gives me chills like every time when it comes. Like, he turns into this like very vengeful like score as he's going to like run after the guy that killed Uncle Ben. I also love the moment when, you know, when the police are talking to him before he runs into the burning building, and he's like, "I'll be here when you're back. I'm not coming back, Chief." And like score is incredible in that moment. That's one of my favorite moments. I think other than that, I think the spider sense scenes are great, like you were talking about earlier, and the fight with Flash in the school. I think that's the only time they use it in this movie. Other than the end of it, when he sees Goblin's blade flying towards him, I think they're really cool at those moments. And of course, the reflections in his eyes as he sees the kids falling and Mary Jane falling on each one, like you mentioned earlier. I think they're amazing. And the final fight at the end of this, when I think that is the best sound design, at least in the first movie, where like the score completely disappears and it just turns into this really ruthless like fight between them, and the battle worn suits, which never happen anymore. I always hate that does not happen with modern
I
comic
love
book
Battle Worn
movies.
Suits. Kobe's looks
It's so
so
good.
good in this.
Yeah. The noises they make when they're punching, some of them are hilarious. The stuff that Defoe comes out with when they're fighting, just you feel every punch. And I think that fight is so good. Even Goblin suit gets pretty destroyed in that fight. I think that is one of my favorite fights in any comic book movie. But yeah,
Oh, I'll never get over that. The bomb explosion in the face. That shot is
so good.
imprinted into my mind. Is so good.
It's so good. That fight is iconic.
Yeah, I mean, I
Nope.
definitely got to talk about the top three most important things in film: one, music; two, music; three, music. Elfman cooks. It's one thing this film does insanely well compared to a lot more modern comic book movies. And there's near wall to wall music, which I love. And like both of you talked about the opening credits, and he just sets the tone right away. And like that opening credit sequence is so perfect. When I saw this in theaters on the re-release a couple weeks ago, like as soon as I heard that score, it kind of just like I jumped back a bit and I was like, oh shit, like this is like, and I just forgot just how great the score of these movies is. And like I still like his Batman score better, but I think like still it's just such, we really have lost these kind of iconic superhero themes. Like can anyone really off the top of their head like think of a character theme musically in the MCU? Like maybe like
It's
Guardians
just
of the
Iron
Galaxy.
Man and it's AC/DC. It's not actual
Yeah,
like
the,
scores.
Musical
It's
score
the
though.
songs.
the
Yeah,
only
they
the
don't use
best
scores.
musical score in the MCU is Black Panther 2, and that's only because it's Gore, and that's only because it's Ludwig.
Yeah. No, yeah, you're right. Ludwig cooks with Black Panther, and Tyler Bates cooks with Guardian 1, and that's about it. Giacchino does a
Yes,
good
the
job.
Guardians theme is good,
Yeah, that's a good one.
but that's
But
mostly soundtrack. To be fair, like the rest of it, but the actual score is great.
it is very good. And Tyler Bates is a good composer who does his name doesn't get mentioned a lot, but I think yeah, like every superhero should have a theme. Like that's something like the old Superman movies did well. It's something the old Batman movies and the new Batman movies have always done well. And I really hate that the genre's lost that. But Elfman, like totally, the theme here is so iconic. It's such a big, it drives so much energy. Like Elfman said he mixed, like he always has traditional orchestras, but kind of mixed in like a lot of percussion. And he had, I think it was Northern Indian drums and African drums he mixed in with like real kind of heavy brass sounds. And then, yeah, he also wrote separate themes for, and he has like this like gong sound that we hear frequently. That's frequently in there. And he said the way he works is he kind of tries to find the emotional point in the middle and then build everything out from there. Like start with the highest emotional point, which he said is never the action. It's always like an intimate emotional scene, which for Spider-Man 2, for example, was the scene where he gives up being Spider-Man and then kind of built everything out from that piece. But yeah, so Elfman did two separate themes for Spider-Man and Peter Parker because the Spider-Man theme was so like triumphant and kind of like strong and confident that it just didn't fit Peter Parker's character. So I like how he kind of wrote two separate themes for the two sides of the characters since it's such a big part of Spider-Man. And yeah, like the sequence where he's designing the suit and it becomes more like kind of rock soundtrack. Like I love that all that stuff. Like especially in the first act, there's so much great score stuff. I do think there's also the first like climbing and swinging scene. Like that's the score there is incredible as well. I do think there's not enough spider sense in this whole trilogy as a whole. Like, I think the spider sense is such an important part of the character, and that's one thing that I don't think this. Like, I like the way they used it in the high school, but I feel like, and you see it like flashes of it, like it's there when in part two with the cab flip, but overall, I think they kind of
And
lost
the
that
train
element.
scene, but they don't
Yep.
really use it till the end. I agree. They don't
Yeah,
use it a ton.
yeah, I think that's like literally one of the most important parts of the character as a whole. So that's one criticism I have. It honestly, all the Spider-Man movies.
Did the other Spider-Man even use it apart from No Way Home when
Not
Tom?
really, no.
Yeah, they use it in the apartment scene in No Way Home, but I think that's the only time.
Yeah, I think that's a big weakness to all the Spider-Man adaptations. But the animated series nailed it, as always. I do love how this whole trilogy feels so connected to the animated series in so many ways. Like, it feels so similar
For sure.
in a lot of ways, which I love. That's unfortunately not one, but the costume's great. I like that Raimi didn't. The costumes to me was such an important part of comic book movies as a kid. Like, that's something I cared about a ton. And Raimi didn't want to like change the character, which I like, and he kept it the suit that we all know. And he also, like I said, found ways to make it realistic in the world. The like I said, back to the New York thing, the night coming off of 9/11, they really kind of use that a lot. And like, especially the scene where they're all throwing food at the goblin, like they really kind of, you see it in New York that was living the aftermath and kind of tried to lift the spirit and the community of the city there, which I think is
This film was right in the middle because I mean the Twin Towers were in the movie initially. There's that teaser for the movie. It was in one of the posters actually, the reflection of his eye, but there's a teaser where he actually puts a helicopter in a web in between the two towers. So yeah, this was right in the middle of like everything happening. So yeah, that definitely is a huge part.
Yeah, totally. And I think so much of this film is like a lot of the dialogue, even though I have criticisms about the dialogue scenes, some of them, I love how a lot of them take place in exteriors in New York where you're just immersed in the environment. Like, so the composers I work with on my own stuff live in Queens. So I've been like going up there over like the last couple months, and it's funny. So like after like spending so much time in Queens in the last year, I then rewatched this film a couple weeks ago, and now I'm like, oh, like I actually know, like it looks familiar. Like I know these locations. So now that I'm more familiar with that area, I realize just how accurate the sense of place is to Queens. Like it really that's what Queens looks like, and they're really out there like shooting on location. Like unlike a lot of the more recent stuff where the background's either CGI or it's just any city, like just insert city background city here, like a video game. These are like it really has like that distinct feeling of Queens.
The streets are always packed as well, and behind all the characters when they're talking, it really feels so alive, like the city.
Totally, yeah, it absolutely is a great energy to it. I totally agree with that, and yeah, I think also like the blocking's very good. Like I think the blocking in this one is the best of any of the films in the trilogy. Interesting thing, like Ryan said, the horror movie suspense type, like the scene where at Thanksgiving when Defoe's in the room, like that scene is the suspense there is just so great. And I think also one interesting thing I learned is that Sam Raimi uses two editors on every film and has them do each one cut of the film and then screens them back to back and then merges the best pieces of each of them together. I thought that was really interesting. But yeah, overall, I love this film. It's a childhood classic, and yeah, I think we need more comic book movies like this because there's so much potential in this genre, and I just don't like how the newer films have kind of are pumping out so many while doing the same thing over and over again. When there's just so many places you could take this genre, and also like comic books are all about visuals and art and like the actual composition. So I hate that the newer ones don't take that same approach. But then we go into number two, which Ryan, why don't you start us off on Spider-Man 2?
Yeah, so Spider-Man 2. This is my favorite movie of all time. Above all the trilogy, of course. I know you said you preferred Spider-Man 1, but I really think there's such a huge jump from Spider-Man 1 and 2 naturally, as the first performs so well that comes the bigger budget, the bigger expectations to really top the first. And there was a lot of changes between 1 and 2. I think 2 feels a lot better, like you were saying. I feel like technical wise it is a lot better. And that comes with addition of a long collaborator of Sam Raimi, Bill Pope, who is one of my favorite cinematographers working today. He is probably the best at action movies, and also known as he's the DP for The Matrix, Scott Pilgrim versus the World, Spider-Man 2 and 3, and he also worked on some of the Evil Dead movies with Sam Raimi. So it's someone they had a strong relationship with. So he came onto this movie, and it really changed how they shot the movie. In Spider-Man 1, Spider-Man was 185 aspect ratio. He was more focused on like the verticalness of the character. Also, I think we talked about this in our Jurassic Park episode. It really captures the height of stuff, which was essential for like the dinosaurs in that movie. So like the city in Spider-Man, you wanted to capture them like going up rather than left and right, and that kind of wider aspect ratio would have cramped it. But in this one, they changed to the 235 aspect ratio, which is a lot more cinematic, and it's often used more for blockbusters generally now. And that's what they continue to return for. So I think this one feels a lot different to Spider-Man 1. It feels less campy. Well, it's still got the Sam Raimi camp, but it feels a little bit less comic booky. It feels a lot more grounded in reality, although the first one was. It feels very different. He doesn't start the film with some Spider-Man action scene. He reminds us straight away of the thing that he gave up at the end of the last movie, and instantly introduce us to the core of the movie, the back and forth responsibility of Spider-Man and the impact that has on Peter Parker's life. And that is the core theme of this movie. Like, he has to sacrifice all the aspects of his personal life. And this film's all about Peter dealing with the real life repercussions of being the hero of the city. The first movie was more focused on him dealing with the kind of excitement of getting these new powers and kind of learning the responsibility, whereas 2 is now kind of really hitting him that he can't balance the two sides of his life. And why would Peter Parker want to be Spider-Man? Because it really makes his life a living hell, and it is not good for his personal life. So that's really what this film is about, and I feel like this film just perfectly understands the character, as Sam Raimi always has throughout this trilogy. So that's why this is my favorite film of all time. But yeah,
Without doubt, greatest superhero film ever made. The only perfect superhero film for me. Just takes everything from the first one and somehow makes it even better. The character connections and the stories are woven so well into this film. They were kind of moving from romance to superhero and how they're linked together, and even Raimi's direction evolves so much in this film. There's so many quotable lines of dialogue that are so famous. You know, the power of the sun in the palm of my hand. And kind of the shot that goes with that, the shot of the goggle, the extreme close up with him on with the goggles. The best scenes of Raimi's kind of direction as a whole from this trilogy come from this film. We get that first scene where Rosie dies and the glass shatters, and you get that the glass goes in and it like the reflection off her thing, and you get that the start of the kind of horror elements that some of this film has that Raimi's pulling from Evil Dead. One of my just favorite scenes of his direction in general, later on with the cafe scene with MJ, you get her slowly moving in, and then the switch to Peter as it zooms in on like half of his face, and you get the reflection of her in his eyes, and that car just comes barreling behind them. Is unbelievable, that scene. I love it so much. But yeah, Doc Ock as a villain is so good, and I think he represents kind of this idea of obsession, and I think he works so well as kind of a pawn between the relationships of our characters in this film, because this is where we kind of start to see the parts of the deterioration of MJ's and Peter's relationship. Things get a lot more complicated, and he's moving back and forth, between if he's committed or not, and if he actually loves her. And we kind of see a lot of internal conflicts with him, like throwing away his suit and kind of getting it back again, and all of this just moving back and forth is so good. And like I mentioned, and Alex was standing earlier, the "punch me I bleed" line in this film is so good, and you are so wrong. It is so good.
Please, in the comment sections, please restore my faith in humanity, because I'm sure that my two co-hosts are just complete idiots on this one. So
Yeah, you're insane, man. We get the action scenes in this amazing. There's kind of that one swing scene earlier on where he like swings through the truck and the camera goes with it. Such a nice scene. Just anytime he's like swinging through like a tight gap and the camera follows him through is so nice. And then obviously that famous Doc Ock surgery machine, the massive Evil Dead kind of references and Raimi's kind of what he's learned just shining through on that scene so well. We get a kind of a small chainsaw kind of thing, and then that POV shot that he's so famous for using in the Evil Dead in his trilogy is so good.
That is the coolest thing anybody's maybe ever done in the history of human
and
mankind.
then he gives like triple POV
to
shot
throw a horror short film into like a movie aimed at kids is ridiculous.
It's so good, and the dragging them into the dark as well. I absolutely love that scene. Yeah, and like I've kind of said previously, slow-mo is something that I like when it's used well. We know filmmakers that use it absolutely horrifically. This film is another clear example, like the first, of how to use slow-mo to absolute perfection with kind of the clock tower sequences. I think work really, really well. But yeah, slow-mo is great when it's timed perfectly, and this kind of trilogy showcases that so well. Makes the action so much more intense and interesting. But yeah, I like the first one as well. The ending ties everything together so well. And that kind of sequence where MJ sees who kind of Peter is for the first time when he's kind of holding up that thing. It's so good, man. It's so good. And then couldn't go without mentioning the train sequence, probably the best action scene in the trilogy. Just the relatability again. He's just a kid, no older than my son. Again, hammering down that relatability of character, and that shot of the hands holding his chest as he's about to fall. So good. But yeah, and I think it's also that kind of the relatability where with Aunt May, I think there's a young guy called Henry, and he's like, oh, Henry needs Spider-Man, and it's just this kind of looking up that kind of staple guy, and he's there, but they don't know that. I think Andrew had it a bit, but I think Tom is just the MCU is massively lacking in that factor as Spider-Man as someone to kind of look up to, and them not realizing that it's actually just an ordinary guy. I think Andrew had it a bit, but Toby has it. Raimi uses that kind of side of the difference between Toby's character and just the rest of society very, very well. That, yeah, like I said, the MCU just doesn't utilize at all, but that doesn't surprise me. But yeah, just perfect film.
yeah, this is like like I said, one of the first real like anticipations I ever had for a film. Like I still remember all the promo and like the excitement. First time I ever saw a film opening day. And I will say that trailers were just as horrible back then as they are today, because when Harry's like, let's see who's behind the mask, like that was in the trailers as a kid. So we all knew that moment was coming. And so trailers were like, I look back, I remember even as a kid being like, why did they like show us this? But like, you're also just so curious because you know it's coming. But so, yeah, I think trailers are still awful, but yeah, like I saw this at a film when I saw this film at an age where I was like still learning about the world, like still learning about movies. And it definitely is another one that had a huge influence on me, even if I rewatched the first one more. And mainly that's because of the horror movie scene that Sam Raimi snuck in here, which was like terrifying as a kid. Like I was 6 years old when I saw this movie. And like I said, we left the first one because my sister was scared. And like this time I was genuinely scared. And I remember when I first rewatched this film, it felt like such an act of bravery, because it was like I just didn't want to watch that scene again. And once I rewatched it, I realized that like the scenes that come after that, like I didn't even remember those scenes. It felt like I had never seen them, because like as a kid, you just can't stop thinking about it. And he creates that so well with like the just the way he uses sound. And like this is a film where I've given the score a lot of praise, the sound outshines the music in this film. And that's no knock to Danny Elfman. Just the sound here is so good. And he, like they say that most sound designers or sound mixers say that's pretty much the music normally takes up a larger percentage in these type of films than the sound. But this was like a rare 50-50 where the sound was more prominent than the music. And I think, like, so in this horror movie scene, there's no music. It's all sounds. And he's using like really uncomfortable sounds, like buzz saws, shattering glass, and like just the screams of people, like being dragged into the shadow, like the nails scraping. The like I said, the buzz
It's all
saws.
just Evil Dead. Like I think Sam Raimi got a bit of flack at this point. After Spider-Man, it felt like he was kind of abandoning the horror genre and abandoning almost kind of his roots for this kind of big blockbuster movie, and he really shut them up with Spider-Man 2 because this is filled with horror moments, and that is just straight up Evil Dead.
Yeah, no, it's so Evil Dead. And it's like so horror movie as well. And like he takes the time, like normally in these like family movies, the kills are like off screen or like kind of just quick and they brush over them. Where like he savors these kills and like savors like the what's the word? The agony of them. Like yeah, it's totally. I didn't realize that like I kind of just like you rewatch it like 2-3 times as a kid and then it's like all right, you get over it. So it's like I kind of forgot about it. And then a YouTuber I really like, the Nerd Writer, his account is called. He did like a video essay on this, and I didn't realize that so many other because now I started looking back like why was I scared of this? Like this is so like nothing's happening. And then apparently I didn't realize that other people felt the same way. But yeah, the character arc here is the strongest one of any Spider-Man movie. And because in this movie, it's really fucking hard to be Spider-Man. Like now we see him being like I said, he made the sacrifice of his want for his need. And now basically his Spider-Man's just going to make everything in his life absolute shit for the entire movie until he eventually gets to finally have what he wants, only after putting him through just so much shit. And this movie puts him through a lot of shit. Like it's hard to be Spider-Man in this movie, and it has so many negative effects on his life. And we're really following now is like his struggle to maintain relationships. Like one, just the struggle of maintaining relationships into adulthood, on top of the fact that he's Spider-Man. So first, we really see the conflicts of being Spider-Man, and then he flips it in the second half and shows us the conflicts of not being Spider-Man. And the like him like missing the save at the fight, like at the burning building, and he misses the one save even though he saves one, and like the power stopped working, and he really just truly has lost everything by the midpoint. He's ruined every relationship he has, and there's just so much like we're such an insider to all the relationships, and there's so much irony where it's like we desperately want MJ to find out, and we desperately don't want Harry to find out in this movie, and because of that, like every conversation, there's like just this underlying unsaid element to it that we're an insider to, and the characters on screen aren't, which I think just makes the script so much stronger than than both the other two films in the trilogy and a lot of other comic book movies. And a big reason why having the secret identity can be really important to the superhero characters, even though now it's kind of just they're more like celebrity status than secret identity.
This is like the Peter Parker movie. I feel like thematically there's a lot more focus on Peter in this movie, about the both sides of his life. And this really just starts off pummeling Peter to the ground, ruining his life straight off the bat. Like we start with the pizza delivery scene. He's basically trying to scrape by with this job whilst he's at uni, and he instantly loses it because of Spider-Man. He gets in the way and becomes late, and he misses the pizza delivery, instantly losing his job. And that's leaves him with only one income source, basically, which is slandering himself for money by selling pictures of himself to J. Jonah Jameson for money, ruining his Spider-Man reputation. So whenever he does something for Spider-Man, it ruins Peter Parker. Whenever he does something for Peter Parker, it ruins his Spider-Man life as well. There's really no winning in this side. And it's just a constant back and forth of ruining each aspect of his life. And we join him at a point where he really just can't balance it at all anymore. Like everything in his life is falling apart. He's always late for class. His grades are declining. He's even forgotten that it's his birthday because he's so focused on that like side of his life, and he's put so little importance on his Peter Parker side. There's even scenes when like the Spider-Man suit runs in, or the colors run into his normal clothes in the laundry, kind of symbolizing the kind of Spider-Man life flowing over into his personal life and taking over. There's also aspects of all his relationships, like kind of putting a strain both sides of his life. With like his relationship with Harry, he has hatred for what he thinks he done to his father from the first one, or for Spider-Man, and that puts strain on their relationship because he's got the link to Spider-Man through being his photographer, so he still kind of like hates him for not telling him who the Spider-Man is. So their relationship's deteriorating. And Raimi just brilliantly expresses like the human characteristics of the character through like things like this, really grounding them in reality, which makes these like whenever there is like a fantastic moment with like action with Spider-Man, like it and the superpowers, like they seem even like larger than life and better because you like get these really low ground, like kind of almost low stakes, real human moments. And at the end of the day, Spider-Man, him having the Spider-Man powers doesn't change his personal life. He's still this like working class kid who's scraping by. He's living in this really shitty New York apartment that really is a representation of kind of his life. It's falling apart. It's like his life. Everything is like at the verge of just falling apart completely and collapsing. And so I think the apartment is one of the great kind of showings of how great the sets and stuff in this movie are. Because like, pretty much that apartment is essential to Peter Parker's character, although the films really don't put the importance on that. There's so many small things that make the character so great in this. Even the scenes with Aunt May really emphasizes like the kind of struggle with money. She's struggling to pay for her house without Ben, taking out loans, living on the last few dollars basically. She's really struggling. In the scene when she tries to give Peter the money for his birthday is that's one of the most heartbreaking moments in the film for me. I think Rosemary Harris, we didn't really talk about her for part one. She's a phenomenal actor in all these moments, especially when it focuses on like the emotional kind of small scale moments outside of the action. I think she's incredible and one of the highlights of the whole trilogy. Like I was saying, like Peter's apartment is brilliant for honing that kind of part of his life because he's also struggling with money, living on nothing. Again, just the only thing he makes money from is ruining his Spider-Man life, and everything is brilliantly just linked to the theme of Spider-Man ruining Peter Parker's life in this movie. And there's a shot in his apartment that basically just sums this all up, and it's the shot of the Spider-Man suit on the left and his suit on the right, summing up his both sides of his life just perfect in this one shot. I love that so much. And I'm interested to see what you think about the relationship with MJ in this movie, because I think it dives even deeper into it in this movie. It's even better than the first one, even though I think the first one is still great. This is, like I've said, this is more than a comic book movie. If you take away all the action and the superhero shit, I still like love the drama romance that's left. And that is really the center point of this movie with Mary Jane and Kirsten Dunst's performance and the chemistry with her and Tobey Maguire. Possibly the most misunderstood character in fiction. The reactions I've been seeing of her in Spider-Man rescreenings is kind of pretty disgusting, honestly.
It is.
And concerning for people's media literacy for booing her for
sorry
showing
that
up in the...
humanity has some common sense.
No, but the things
Yeah,
they've been
idiots
saying is
have common
actually
sense.
horrific.
I mean, I'm not on Twitter, so I don't know what they're saying. I don't think it's bad enough to boo. Like, I don't blame Kirsten Dunst for it. I just think the character's hardly written. But Ryan, you can finish. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
There's her and Skylar White from Breaking Bad. Those are the two big like red flag women characters in fiction that I think people overly hate. And yet, well, the last film left us with like that commitment of pushing Mary Jane away to protect her, and it pretty much every stage of this film it's showing the hardship and kind of repercussions of that decision. Even like from her perspective, Peter is just this like really constantly disappointing guy that is just he's missing her shows, everything. He's just not there, and he just looks like a bum when you don't have the context of him being actual Spider-Man. And there's a scene reminiscent of the backyard moment in the first one in the movie when they meet in the back after Peter's birthday. Clearly they both love each other, but Peter can't allow her back into his life. And MJ once again is kind of she seems as if she's ready to commit to Peter again, like she did at the end of the first one, but Peter just keeps pushing her away. and that's when it's revealed that she's dating another guy, J. Jonah Jameson's son. Well, you don't find out at this point, but later on we find that out. Moving on from Peter, who is right for her, but he keeps pushing her away. So she kind of dates this stable guy. Like I was saying, she never feels like she actually earned anything because of the trauma from her father. He does care about her. This is a nice guy. He's
I was
he's
just
got a
about to
national
say,
job.
what does this dude do? I get the Harry argument. What does this dude do?
Yeah,
Other
this
than
guy,
not
he doesn't do anything wrong. That it is unfair on him, but he's not Peter Parker. And it's not, and I don't think there's anything wrong that MJ does, because she maybe left a bit late going to the
She leaves
wedding.
the guy at the stand at the wedding like a jerk off.
Yeah, but it's very clear that she's not in love with him throughout the film. And there's a scene in Spider-Man 2.1, it's called. It's like the extended version, where she's talking with her friend about the engagement. I mean, she says something like, "John loves me. My father would always say that you'll never be anything that a man will ever love." So like I was saying, like that, it comes back up, even though they've cut it. Although I think this is a very important scene. This scene adds so much to her character. It's clear that she doesn't love John, but if she isn't going to be able to be with Peter, she just wants to settle down with like a nice guy, and she constantly feels that she has to kind of gain the approval of her father, even though he's not really in her life anymore, and she's still damaged from the abuse that he gives to her, that we do see in the first movie when she's leaving the house. So yeah, I think there's a lot more to MJ's character that gives credit for. And then yeah, Peter just keeps disappointing her. He gets ready to go see MJ at the theater, but what happens again? Spider-Man gets in the way. A car theft drives past, and he has to go and deal with that. And once again, he's late. Once again, letting down MJ and sending his personal life into even a further spiral. And we have another great cameo by Bruce Campbell in this moment, where he's the guy that doesn't let him into the theater. And he's so funny. And it's even funnier with the element, because there's like theories that he was supposed to be Mysterio throughout the trilogy. So it's kind of Mysterio messing with him. It's quite funny if you look at it from that way.
Yeah, it's awesome.
But yeah, his cameos are so
Spider-Man 4 villain, Bruce Campbell as Mysterio.
I heard that they actually were going to do that. Like he had plans to do that and all.
Yeah, it was kind of like a back plan.
And when I saw this on the re-release, in typical Spider-Man fashion, I was late to the movie.
Oh my god. No, in typical you fashion, you mean, not typical Spider-Man fashion.
Don't get to put that on Peter Parker.
No, we got shit to do.
You don't have the excuse of being Spider-Man.
Or do I? And you just don't know about it.
Yeah. Yeah, but I think, look, everything that I've mentioned kind of culminates into the best scene in the movie, kind of emphasizing the theme of the movie. And that's the party that they're having to announce that Mary Jane and J. Jonah Jameson's son are going to get married. And this is an awful moment for Peter. Everything goes wrong for him. Like, Harry slaps him for not telling him Spider-Man's identity. Every time he tries to grab a drink or food from a waiter, it's empty or it's ran out. And then to finish it all off, like, it's revealed that MJ is dating his son and they're going to marry. And even then, he still has to take a photo of it because it's his job and it's his only source of income for his life. So he has to keep taking photos of this horrifying moment in his life. And this is the perfect scene that massively shows just the character of Peter Parker, everything in his life falling apart because of Spider-Man. And it's so good.
The scene where J. Jonah Jameson calls that woman that guy's girlfriend, and look on their face, his face, he's just standing there. So funny. He's got such an awkward pose about him when that photo is being taken. It's so funny.
He's perfect and everything.
It's just I love how different he acts outside of the office. Especially in this scene, he's just going around from place to place. Oh, can we get a picture of this? Can we get a picture of this one? And he's like poses like this, like looking really happy. Oh my god, it's so funny. Oh,
yeah. Going on to, I mean, you spoke about Doc Ock a bit, but I think he really is the best Spider-Man villain. And it really sets out the kind of, like we were saying, Raimi cares so much about how it attaches to Peter Parker's personal life, and that I think this is the best case of that. Like, Peter admires everything about his life, when he goes to visit him before the experiment and stuff has happened, and he has this like great intellectual job as a scientist. He has the balance of the lovely wife. This is basically just everything that Peter wishes that his life could be like. He is basically Peter Steiner, basically, in this movie. And then it's all ruined in different ways to La Dolce Vita, but it all comes to a collapse. And yeah, he doesn't take care of the power that he has, unlike Peter, and he kind of loses the love of his life. And that moment you're talking about, Oscar, where the glass comes towards her, and that has all the reflections. That's such a great scene. And it's really so impactful because we take the time to kind of spend the moment with them, kind of finding out about their relationships and the characters in this. I think it's like 5 minutes long, and you kind of just find out about how they met and stuff. So I think that really puts so much care into their relationship. And again, Raimi just inserts so much horror into these moments with the arms, all done. They're actually as practical arms with people maneuvering and controlling all of them. It's not all just CGI. And like you were saying, the horror shot that he puts in, that's amazing. And probably one of the best shots in the movie is when he wakes up after all that's happened. Like, his arms have just murdered everybody about him, and he wakes up to like find what's happened. Because the most interesting thing about his character really is that it's not all him that's being like an evil guy. He's being manipulated by these arms, and it's kind of emphasizing all his kind of emotions and stuff. It's almost like the symbiote from Spider-Man 3 in a way, where they're kind of controlling him and making him do stuff that it wouldn't naturally do without the arms. So everything about this character is Sam Raimi. Even in like Multiverse of Madness and stuff, the kind of arcs and stuff they're taking for Wanda, I think they're highly influenced from this character. So I really love the stuff that he does with his villains, and I think Doc Ock is one of my favorite villains just in general in film, not just comic book movies. I think this is really definitely the best villain that Spider-Man has.
Well, to start, I will say the MJ scenes are better. I think a part of that is because there's more distance between them here, and like it's more like it's less dialogue and it's more show don't tell. I think like them the looks at the party when she's coming down the steps, like stuff like that. I think it's a lot better. Like, she talks about him being the one who hasn't seen her show. Like, it just the dialogue is a lot better. Also, I forgot to mention one of the worst MJ dialogue moments in the first film, when she's like, "Has Spider-Man asked about me?" Oh, yeah, Spider-Man's just going to ask the random photographer who has no clue who knows the random girl on the street he saved. Like, it makes no sense. But back to this film. I do think it's better. I still don't think those scenes are a strength, but I think it's definitely better. I think that the irony under it of him like makes him a lot better. Like, the fact that we know he's not he doesn't care as little as she thinks he cares. I think that underneath all the conversations makes it a lot better. And that same kind of underlying irony is great for all the Harry interactions as well. Like Ryan said, does a great job with Aunt May. They actually like make her a hero in the movie. And she has like real, like I said, like death actually has effects long-term in this movie. And like we really feel the aftermath of Uncle Ben's death. And it's on her end, like financially, especially. So yeah, like all the character works great. And yeah, I think in terms of just Sam Raimi's film, or actually real quick, Doc Ock, I agree, probably the best written villain. Like, I think the Goblin is a little cooler. Like, I just love the Goblin, but like Doc Ock's definitely the best villain for sure. I like how they use his arms practically, definitely. And, people forget that like Alfred Molina really had to make it look like he's using muscle and like his brain to make the arms move. So that definitely, like the coordination between his like body performance along with the arms moving, they had to really rehearse that a lot to sync that up. And yeah, he's really like kind of like a mirror to Peter, and the way they're both scientists, and the way he's kind of like a science experiment gone wrong, where Peter was kind of a science experiment to a degree gone right. And yeah, Doc Ock is, I think the suit, I wish they used a little more comic accurate suit. Like, I just think it would have been a little cooler. It would have been less realistic, but
the trench coat is so cool. I think that's better than the comic.
His comic suit's cooler. But Doc Ock, I love his ability to multitask, like how he can like light a cigar while he's like. I think they maybe could use that a little more, but yeah, like I said, the sound they use for him is great too. So they actually for Doc Ock used it was a motorcycle chain for the spine, and then piano wires, which are really strong. It's hard to break them. Were used for like the fluidity of the arms, and yeah, the sound guys did what was his name? It was I think Paul Ottoson, I think his name was. He did the sound design for this film and did an absolutely phenomenal job. And like I
I think
said,
he done Spider-Man 2 and 3, and the sound is a huge upgrade on both of those from 1.
totally agree. And yeah, he also, of course, though, Danny Elfman, like I said, sound does outshine music a bit here, but in that third act, Danny Elfman absolutely came to play. The third act score is so great. In all of his scores, whether it's this or Batman or other Tim Burton films, like Danny Elfman loves to use vocal choirs in his scores to make things feel more epic, and like it really elevates all or at least these two scores. He didn't do the third one. But yeah, even little things also, like the way the score subtly changes when Harry asks Peter about Spider-Man in the beginning. And like the all the stuff with MJ, the irony the music creates, like the music, like I said, that's why Attack of the Clones I think is better, is because of the music. And here I think the music with MJ is a lot better. Like when she's walking down the steps, or when he's waiting outside the show because he couldn't get in because of Bruce Campbell, and he sees her across the street with J. Jonah Jameson's son. And then like the score, like the kind of vocal, like soprano choir with like these long orchestral strings when she finally finds out is just, it's totally great. And I think the biggest area they upgraded here is the visual effects. And they just took such a huge step forward. There's a lot that most people probably don't realize is VFX, and the blending is so perfect. The way everything matches fluidly between practical stunt guys and CGI. It got Sony their first ever VFX win. The final shot where Doc Ock sinks is actually all visual effects. Like that's visual effects Alfred Molina, which is really impressive stuff that, you know, a lot of the effects there are not as impressive. Like we said, they don't have the time to really perfect it. And Sam Raimi, like one thing I love about the Star Wars movies is how much George Lucas doesn't get appreciated for like his mastery of like motions and motion speeds. And Sam Raimi in all these films really puts a lot of care into that. Like he has Spider-Man move in such fluid ways, and really just like the fluid motions of Spider-Man swinging and the different motion speeds. He does such a great job with. And lots of smoke machines. And they said they wanted to create more vertigo with the swinging through New York shots. We definitely get more of them. I do think the dialogue scenes suffer a bit because of the amount of time and effort that needed to be put into the stunts, where a lot of them are just one-on-one. The world around them just kind of shuts down, which I don't normally love, but I understand considering how many big stunts and visual effects they were doing. But it's also not like a total coverage fest. Like the back and forth shot, reverse shot will change on story beats, which like most modern films never really do, which I hate. And yeah, of course we can't end this talking about this film without briefly talking about the subway scene. One of the greatest action sequences in comic book movie history. It's absolutely incredible. I like high speed things. It's high speed. You know, it's moving, you know, x-axis, z-axis coming out at us. Like it's a communal, it's like the subway is a symbol of New York. It's a communal experience, like the 9/11 fallout still, with just that communal New York moment. And yeah, it's like in the end, it reminds us at the end of the day, like the core arc of the story, that Peter is just a kid dealing with a really big responsibility. And the New Yorkers on the subway really remind us that, you know, most kids are only worried about like the Peter Parker side of the problems. And he's a college age kid who's taking on these huge world problems, which I think is such a strength. And yeah, Spider-Man 2, it's definitely one of the better superhero movies of all time, in my opinion.
Focusing on, I didn't mention the train scene yet, so I think that is such a great focal point of like the whole action scene. I love it. Oh, we didn't talk about the right before the train scene, or is it? No, one of the moments where the transition from when he steals his suit back, some J. Jonah Jameson, they fly through the window. The newspaper flies towards the screen. He flies through the newspaper, flies through the city, into Doc Ock's glasses, the most insane transition.
Oh my
ever.
god, the glasses transition. I forgot about that. That is so good.
It's ridiculous. The transitions in the whole trilogy are amazing. It's almost become something that Sam Raimi's known for throughout all these films. Just great transitions. There's one at the end of the train scene as well when he knocks over Spider-Man and it goes into the Spider-Man emblem and it transitions into Harry's apartment. So good. I think the train scene is one of my favorite action scenes of all time. I love, like, obviously because it's kind of canonically known that Spider-Man kind of has to hold back. So when he kind of has to kind of put everything into stopping this train and put every single ounce of his power that his suit starts to tear, it's so good. And I love these moments as well where they use like dolly zooms or the spider sense where it goes to the end of the track, like you were talking about, that they don't use a whole ton, but I think it's really used well in this moment, and it really shows off Raimi's flair with cinematography. This is filled with so much great stuff, like trying to save the people getting thrown out of the train, again focusing on the New York people, like you were saying. Is so good. This is one of the best fight scenes ever. And just going back to the party scene and he gives up Spider-Man. Brilliant Raimi camp straight after that with raindrops keep falling on my head is Peter's just loving life once he's given up Spider-Man. His Peter Parker life is thriving. Everything is going brilliant. He's back to school, doing everything on time, enjoying life. He's now ready to commit to MJ finally managing to make one of her shows. But yeah, I think you've mentioned this, Alex. You do start to see the consequences of that, like crimes going up. He's ignoring people that need help. He goes into that burning building and he doesn't manage to save everybody. And he kind of starts to see that the city does need him. What happens when there isn't a hero? And one of the best scenes in the movies where Peter admits to Aunt May that he could have stopped the guy who killed Uncle Ben, and he's kind of reminded of the consequences of what happens when he does nothing. He let that man go, and it kind of resulted in Uncle Ben's death, and he's reminded of the responsibility that Uncle Ben told him. And I love. I forgot to mention the scene where he tells Uncle Ben that he can't be Spider-Man anymore. I adore that scene. It is showing back to the first one. It is so emotional, and I think that Uncle Ben he's a phenomenal actor in in the short moments that he does have. And again, Rosemary Harris's performance in these movies is so underrated because of the emotion she brings to every scene, and this is even more impactful because of what she doesn't do. Like, she can't even like face Peter after what she tells him, and she just walks away. And the disappointment in her face is really on show in this moment, and it's one of the most impactful, like, emotional moments in the movie, I think. And then I think we talked about this earlier as well, when Aunt May's moving and the neighbor's son comes over to help, and Peter really starts to see what Spider-Man means to the people of the city, the symbol of hope that he is to the young kids, like we were saying. And he now goes back to trying to get the powers, but you get the scene where he tries to do the iconic jump from the first movie and he falls and hurts his back, which is a reference, not on purpose, to when Tobey Maguire actually hurt his back before Spider-Man 2, and he tried to get more money from the studio. He was using his back injury as that. And Jake Gyllenhaal almost was replaced as Spider-Man, actually. So it's kind of a small reference to that, but I don't think it was on purpose. But it's funny to look back on it like that. And again, another amazing scene in the diner where Peter and MJ meet to finally accept, kind of talk about their relationship. But Peter's back to that mindset of keeping her safe. And as they go to kiss, Doc Ock throws his car at him. I mean, there's the thing. He would have just killed Peter Parker, maybe.
Unbelievable.
If he wasn't able to dodge that. But it's such a good scene. The spider sense kicking in and the slow motion of him grabbing MJ and jumping to the ground. And of course, Elfman's score coming into full force as he drops his glasses and his powers come back is an insane moment. And that's really where his score shines in the movie. But yeah, once again, Peter's kind of giving up MJ for the sake of being Spider-Man at the end. But she's willing to risk being with him and kind of leaves poor John at the altar, meeting him in the apartment for a great ending where it kind of finishes on MJ, a shot of her watching him fly away. And it ends on a good moment there. He's kind of got a balance in his life of his personal life and his Spider-Man life coming together.
Yeah, I think it's time to move into Spider-Man 3, which we all feel is a very overhated movie. This is, of course, kind of like the controversial one in the trilogy where there's a lot of people who aren't so big on this movie. When I first saw this movie, like this, there was so much hype. Like this, I remember two clear as day. Like by this point, it's like I had seen the animated series multiple times. Like I was a huge Spider-Man fan. Like there was so much buildup and hype for this by the time I got to see this one. And as a kid, like a lot of my enjoyment was based on the characters and like the costumes and just seeing the characters from the animated series there. So like I love this movie as a kid. Like I rewatched this again and again and again. Like I thought it was just as good as 1 and 2. Like I thought it was incredible. There were like undeniable flaws even when I was 9 years old, but like I just overlooked them because it was such a banger. And I still think overall like it's an enjoyable film. Like I think there's undeniable flaws, but like the highs are so high that it's like not that big a deal like people make them out to be. And yeah, I think 1 and 2 are very clear and distinct. Like there's a very clear arc, and this one's definitely a lot more scattered. And the like Spider-Man 2 wrapped up everything kind of so perfectly with like Peter had sacrificed his one for the need in 1, and then in 2 because of the need, like shit on him so much, he finally got what he wanted. So it definitely was probably difficult for them as to where to take the character, and it might not be as direct and clear as 1 and 2, but I do think they really did an interesting job with the character arc where now they really just kind of had, now that Peter has everything he wants and everything he needs, it opens up like almost like a fantasy movie. Like everything's just going smoothly, it's going perfectly, and we really start seeing the ego of him being Spider-Man building up, and like his success in contrast with MJ's kind of like not downfall, but like her failures and her life not going where she wants it to go. And they create great conflict between them through that, like kind of the way their lives are going in different directions, with Peter becoming a lot less sympathetic and like understanding about her, and like he's just kind of so caught up in it, like his own ego and his own accomplishments that he really neglects a lot of her own problems, which I think is pretty strong conflict, and I thought was a good direction to take the character, building off of 1 and 2, which kind of wrapped everything up so perfectly. And he's kind of now in over his head and like becoming a villain without realizing it, whereas where Venom works perfectly. However, even though I like the direction they chose to go, I don't love all of the execution. There's like I said, there's a lot of high highs, but like I just can't get over like for start the retcon of Sandman's terrible. The Harry getting amnesia feels like overstuffed and like a cheap writing decision, but like at the same time, everything in the first 2 films is building to Harry. So how do you not go anywhere with that? But also like people wanted to see new villains. The studio forced Venom in, but Raimi didn't want Venom. So there's a lot of like too many pieces in here for it to be as clear as 1 and 2. But at the end of the day, like doing Venom, I think was still the right move. Like if this was the Twitter era, like it's 100% you're getting Venom because everyone like Venom was what everyone wanted to see. And like I said, I was like had seen the animated series multiple times in completion by this point, and the Venom saga was like probably one of the best series of the animated series. Like I still remember having
Venom's the highlight of that show.
Oh, 100%. Like that was one of the strongest like sagas of the cartoon, absolutely. And this does kind of stay loyal to it, even though it doesn't execute as well. But there was so much excitement about Venom. Like we came to this movie to see Venom. Like I remember seeing a trailer and being worried that we were seeing so much more Sandman that Venom wasn't actually in the movie. And I did leave the theater feeling we didn't get enough of him. And I don't think the execution of him was great. Like I think he's only an Act 3 villain. And as I get older, I don't mind that as much because it really is about the black suit Spider-Man part of that story. I just wish that there was more Venom kind of after that. But the black suit Spider-Man really, I think, is perfect for where they wanted to take his character. Just the casting of Topher Grace is really what like makes it tough. Like Raimi cared so much in 1 and 2 and with Sandman about sympathetic villains that like you could kind of understand or root for. And like Eddie Brock is just so unlikable in this in every way. Like he's just a prick all around. Like there's no way anyone's like rooting for him. And it feels like they casted someone for you to root against. I get that like maybe since Flint Marco's like kind of like a big, more rugged guy, that they didn't want the traditional Eddie Brock look, which they thought might have been too similar to that. But like it just feels, it's just so not Venom, and like I just think they did such a poor job with that character, which is definitely my biggest issue. But there's so many highs to this movie. Ryan, what are your defend? I know you're dying to defend this movie, so.
Yeah, like you said, this is definitely the most polarizing movie in the trilogy, and yeah, it's like you were saying, it's difficult in the first to, especially when it started off as such a like auteur-driven movie, and I think Raimi was almost damaged by his own success, because obviously as it becomes more popular, more successful, this was really further into the big comic book movie boom of the 2000s. This was a different landscape to when he made Spider-Man 1 and even Spider-Man 2, and big changes were coming for the genre, and the studio clearly got involved later on into this movie. It was later on into the superhero craze, so there was a lot of more importance on the franchises, and the like Nolan's Batman had started at that point. The MCU was on the horizon, so there was a lot more pressure on them, and I think more secure in that, like more money focused. They wanted to make toys with Venom, so they kind of forced that on him. And it's not this. I don't think the Venom thing is the Venom's putting a lot of importance on Raimi, but we're not liking it. But I think he did like the character, but it wasn't somebody that he loved, like a classic villain, like a Goblin or a Doc Ock, because Venom was relatively new villain to Spider-Man. Like you said, in the animated series, he was the highlight of that. So it was a big boom of his character coming up, but it just wasn't somebody that Raimi grew up loving. So he actually didn't write any of the Venom stuff. That was kind of forced on him by the studio. And one of the writers wrote everything about that, and a lot of it is influenced from the animated series, and it is the best moments from those as well. So I always loved seeing the almost straight ripped out of the animated series into live action. But when the studio gets involved and makes changes to your story, it's hard to keep it feeling like your own movie. And this was a difficult one, because it was like there was a release date set even before they even started working on it. So they were working on this before even they should have. There was like so many different versions of scripts. Sandman was always part of it, but initially there was Vulture was supposed to be the other villain. So there was a lot of changes and different versions of this movie throughout production, until they obviously ended up settling on Venom and Sandman, and Harry being the villains. But yeah, the symbiote, I think Raimi makes it his own. He still adds a lot of his unique style to it, and I love the stuff that he does with it. The symbiote has a lot of horror elements, and it plays well thematically into the story. And the symbiote exaggerating this newfound confidence that he has coming into this. It was still a thematical continuation of the second one. Like the two sides of his life have like sort of balanced by the end of the second one. And his life, both as Spider-Man and Peter's, kind of going great at the start. Like you were saying, he's attending uni all the time. He's making it to still. He's doing good. He's making the plays with MJ. Everything's going well, and it kind of gains a lot of confidence and cockiness from that. He gets the key to the city, so his ego is through the roof. So the symbiote and exaggerating that all plays well into that. Whereas there's also the Sandman storyline, where I think Sandman does have that core like kind of connection to the story of Peter, like the other villains did in the other movies. But I do see that Venom doesn't necessarily have that classic Raimi villain style that you would normally see. But I love Sandman. The fact that, I know you said you didn't like that he was linked to Uncle Ben's death. I love the fact that he is in this. But again, like any Raimi, he does have that deep backstory to their motivations because of that connection to Uncle Ben. All he wants to do is support his sick daughter. Every decision he makes it's not for selfish reasons. Everything he does is for his family, and Spider-Man's just kind of in the way of that. So I really love that connection. And one of the best scenes in the movie is when Sandman's first formed out of the sand. It is really some beautiful CGI, and it almost looks perfection. It really is probably the best CGI in the whole trilogy. And then the CGI had obviously evolved so much by the time they reached the third one, and this was a real showcase of where we were at that point, and brilliantly evoking the emotion of Sandman being born as Christopher Young score. Danny Elfman did not return for this one, although I love the score in this one still, especially with
Yeah, I
the
agree. Didn't realize that.
yeah, I think Christopher Young has some great films. He made the Hellraiser score, which I also love. So I think he's got some great history as well. Danny Elfman fell out with him a bit because they used some of the classic score, and that's why you can't listen to Christopher Young's score on stuff like Spotify because
Oh,
they
really?
came up there. Yeah, there was some legal disputes about using his score, but I think there's a lot of emotion behind Sandman. Like when he tries to grasp the photo of his daughter after he just turns into Sandman. There's some great moments like that. And it does link straight into Peter Parker. Like his pride won't allow him to be wrong. It links back to the first one where he didn't kill the guy, but his actions of chasing him ended up getting him killed, and there's all that guilt and him becoming a hero and his perspective that he's just trying to save his daughter and Spider-Man stopping him, and he looks at this grander scope of right and wrong, and the black suit kind of elevates all these emotions and exaggerates them to kind of him reaching a point where he doesn't care and he becomes almost an anti-hero when the symbiote takes him over. And I love the moments when Black Spider-Man fights Sandman. There's some great stuff with the sound design, and some of the best action that Bill Pope has shot. I love it so much. It's the black suit. I remember when this came out. This is the only one that I can like properly vaguely remember coming out into the cinemas, and I just have visions of the cinemas being covered in like black Spider-Man like posters and all that. So I was 7 when this came out, so this is the one that I really have the most memory of coming out into cinemas for me. So I've always loved this movie. I still think it's greatly underrated in comic books.
Yeah, I completely agree. This is the this is the one of the trilogy that's grown on me most of the time. I absolutely love it now. I can see the things with kind of the introduction of Venom, people saying it's a bit messy, and I can see that, but it's just some of the Venom scenes are so cool. Just that shot of the black suit with him on the spire. It's like one of the coldest poses ever. That poster as well is so cool. I just like all the posters and artwork for this film. With like the duality between the two of them, I think works so well. And like you said, Sandman is like a clear kind of Raimi villain. He works on so many levels with this film emotionally, and I like. I completely agree with what you said, Ryan, about him being involved with his father's death. I think it works miracles for the level of emotion in this film. It is so good. More of kind of Raimi's directional juice shining through, that kind of the crane crash scene where he's diving straight down, just
The
diving
sound
through everything,
design
and
is
the
too
lens
good.
reflection at the start of that is so good. Yeah, and the shot at the end where he swings in front of the US flag, just runs in front of it, is such a nice shot. And the Peter's obviously takes a big character change in kind of the middle of this film, is very iconic, very funny. Makes you laugh every time. It's a surprising one, but he just turns into this really edgy character that is so vastly different.
It works
It's
well because Peter Parker, again, we were talking about that being that nerdy guy. He thinks he's very cool,
yeah,
and he plays into that. Perfectly make him think that he looks cool, whereas everybody's looking at him as like this weirdo, and that's why it works so well. I feel like people look at this as like it's cringy and bad, but like you almost have to like have fun like with the character. It's Raimi's trying to make it funny. It's not as if this wasn't intentional. I don't know. How do you look at emo Peter Parker coming out and doing the dance and think that this isn't on purpose to be funny? Like,
Yeah, it definitely shows his lack of self-awareness where like I said, like his ego's getting too big, and like it really does show his lack of self-awareness. I think that in terms of the hair and makeup department, this is the best job they do with MJ. However, they really did Peter no justice here with the hair and makeup they give him. It's just
I think MJ is actually my least favorite in this movie. I don't like her hair.
I think they got a good like variety of styles. I think it's easily her worst too in terms of that department. But I
Really.
think regardless, I was more kind of giving them a compliment before I said how bad of a job they did with Peter. It's just so ridiculously emo.
Yeah, the two club scenes that we get, kind of near halfway through, another one at the end. I just think of I can't stop thinking about La La Land every time those scenes come up. It just reminds you so much of La La Land. Is crazy, but yeah, I really like those scenes. And that scene where he's underground with Sam Rand, he's like, "Oh, what does it matter to you ever?" And he's just like, "Everything." Is so good, so good. Yeah, those two work so well. It's crazy. But yeah, I absolutely adore this film. But it's such a good time. You don't get anything
I
else
feel
to
like
add?
the relationship with MJ is interesting in this one because it's almost like the alternative of like Peter, because it's like her life is almost falling apart like Peter's did in the second one, and the relationship's pretty good to begin with, but like join them as like Peter's ready to propose to MJ, and there's like the great scenes with Aunt May where he gets the ring and stuff. I love the fight with Harry where he's not in his suit, and it's almost this back and forth of just trying to constantly grab the ring. I love that. And some great practical blends of CGI in that fight as well. But I think Toby is so good as playing Peter as this like blissfully unaware of how MJ is feeling all the time, and like he smiles and stuff. Or like they're so funny because he's just trying to be such a nice guy to her. But his ego and his like self-importance has just reached this point where he doesn't really know how to comfort her. And there's like this points where she's getting criticized about her like job and critics in the newspaper, and he's trying so hard to like comfort her, but he's just being a bit of a dick and he doesn't realize what he's doing. And I think some of the expressions that he has is so funny how just unaware of himself he is, and that's really plays into the further in the movie where he really becomes like the anti-hero, and all those emotions and stuff really become exaggerated. And I think I love the scene where you were talking about when in the dance, the jazz bar when they're dancing, and then it ends up punching MJ. I think that's such a great emotional moment, and I love when he takes the jacket off and Bryce Dallas Howard's like hair flies back, like the wind from him taking his jacket off is so good. But yeah, it's just all the moments where he thinks he's so cool, but he's really not. That really plays into it. Obviously, there's the key to the city scene as Peter's ego comes to the top, and this is probably he kisses his lab partner, and that people somehow expect Mary Jane to be in the right. Makes no
I
sense.
know,
In
it's
this.
crazy.
Yeah, but that
And
decision is so like that's a major writing flaw because it's just so out of character and unmotivated. Like, why does he kiss her? Like, he
no,
knows
it's not a right
MJ's
character flaw because he's at this point where his ego is so big, he's getting the key to the
Yeah,
city. He's doing his little dance. He's the Spiderman tune getting played. There's
the scene where
merchandise
he's
getting
trying to
sold.
propose and like MJ's just sat there. He just has no idea why she's sad.
No,
He's
that scene's good.
he only thinks by himself.
No, I get that, but like it's I just feel like the kiss is so out of character. Like even at age 9,
He's done it once.
What's up?
He did it once already. Why not twice?
When did you do it the first time?
The first film. I mean, like to see him like kissing someone as Spider-Man, not like
Yeah, but like he
cheating
knows
on them.
MJ's watching, and like he obviously
No,
does
but
love MJ. Like
yeah,
it's
he sees it as like two
feels
different people. He doesn't see it as himself
Yeah, he
kissing her. He
does.
sees it as Spider-Man kissing her.
I don't know that
Yeah.
one felt like the writers were kind of forcing it. I like a lot about the arc, but that one for me, I thought it felt forced.
Yeah, because it plays so well into that dinner scene like you were talking about in the French restaurant. Again, another brilliant, another cameo by
Bruce
Bruce
Campbell.
Campbell. That's
Campbell,
honestly
yeah.
the best one in the entire trilogy. Like he's hilarious in this, and he is such a big part. And like there's such conflict between them. And every time we cut to him, it's just it adds so like this is what the MCU also. It's not about having a corny joke. It's like there's just good situational comedy where like Bruce Campbell, every time you see him, and he's like, nope, bad timing. Like it's hilarious. Or like in Spider-Man 2, when the guy's just like, oh, nice Spider-Man suit. He's like, oh, yeah, I made it myself. The situational comedy versus just like the corny jokes.
Mm-hmm. I love in that scene when Mary Jane walks away and the violinists just keep playing as he like drags the ring out of the wine, even though it's like went horribly wrong, and they just keep playing it. That's such a great scene. But yeah, I don't think I really love like how kind of unaware Peter is of like how he's acting with Mary Jane, and I think that whole arc is brilliant.
Mm.
Another thing, the sound design. I think this has the best moments, maybe even better than 2 for sound design. There's that crane scene where he's flying through all the debris flying at him, and that again, like you said, Oscar, like the reflection in his eyes. I love that so much. And he flies past the flying concrete to grab Gwen. The real rock bottom of when he punches MJ, and that leads into the insane transition of Christopher Young's score up to the top of the watchtower. That is one of my favorite scenes in the whole trilogy. And then the iconic ripping the symbiote off. That's straight out the animated series. That pretty much is it. Shocker's chasing him, Alex? I think it's that scene. I think Shocker's chasing him to the top of the tower and he rips it off. I think that's the same scene. So it's pretty much straight out of the animated series. So yeah, I love some of those moments.
No, you're right. I'm pretty sure I think you're right. Yeah, I think it is Shocker.
And the scene when he lifts these classics out of the briefcase and the classic Elfman theme comes back up. That scene has me doing backflips. That is so good. And then I love the whole final fight as well. I think the construction site with the sand is such a great kind of set piece for the final fight, even though, I mean, it really showed in No Way Home when they basically just tried to copy it and it kind of falls flat, how great Raimi uses it. And there's some great horror moments in there, because once Eddie Brock gets the symbiote suit, he almost becomes this like culmination of like the bad side of Peter and all the bad sides. He's like his emotions and stuff throughout the film. He becomes just this centerpiece villain rather than the kind of usual villain that we've been seeing that's centered to his relationship or his personal life. He's kind of just this very evil guy compared to the other villains, like you were saying. I do get what you mean. And I do get why people think it's messy, but Venom is so cool. He's like this horror creature that basically hunts him down within the construction site. And there's some great moments of silence where the sound design shines. And then my favorite moment in the movie is when Harry comes to save him. Their relationship, I love. The memory loss stuff is stupid, but I love the scenes that happen because of it, because you get to see Harry and Peter as actual friends, because you do not get to see that in the trilogy, because the first one, Harry is jealous of him with the amount of attention that his father gives him. And then in the second one, he's too focused on his father's death, so their relationship isn't very good. So this is the only moment when you get to actually see their relationship as actual friends. And then it works so well when he manages to forgive him for killing his father and come to save them at the end. Christopher Young's score is amazing in that moment as well, when he picks him up and saves him against Venom and Sandman. I love the end scene so much. That's one of the best fights in the movies. But yeah, do you have anything else to add?
Yeah, a couple of things about the characters. I think Sandman is like, he's a really cool villain, and he's definitely like a B villain, so it was a bit of a bold decision to make him the villain. I think I like a lot of the stuff, like the molecules changing, like in the first film's awesome. The sand truck scene, like you mentioned, is a lot of horror, like elements and score and suspense, and like the Sam Raimi Evil Dead, like handheld all over the place camera he uses in like swinging action, but as well he brings that here, which I like. Of course, like another subway scene, like too, but this time it's inside, and he does a great job with like just that whole inner like subways, like really a lot of open space set design is really cool with like the elevation and everything. So I like a lot about his character, like his motivations. I just don't like the retcon. Like it made no sense when I was 9, and it makes no sense now. Like why it just feels so forced to create a personal connection where, like, I don't know, you could have found some way to make a personal connection without just rewriting the history of the first film, which I never liked. But when you take that away, I really do like the Sandman character a lot. I think that yeah, like back to Venom, like I like a lot of what they were doing from a writing perspective. It's really just the casting of Topher Grace is the big one. I don't like Gwen's character. She feels like one big convenience just in every situation. Is like she's just there to like cause conflict and like serve the plot rather than actually being like a character. But Harry's the interesting one because to start, like he has a cool glider. His suit sucks. I think the suit's terrible. But like this is where you should have used some purple. Like you didn't use it with the goblin in the first one.
Yeah.
So like here use some purple to make it different from Willem Dafoe's. But yeah, this is what everything's been building to. But at the same time, it's like we're here to see Venom, and Raimi wanted to do Sandman, which I think is a good idea. And like people don't want to see just a repeat of a villain we've seen before, especially when you have as many villains as Spider-Man. So the Harry situation really did kind of put them in a tough spot. The opening fight between him and Peter with like the tight alley and like the high speed dodging, like it really is that's an awesome scene. The 3D craze of that late 2000s, definitely. You kind of see elements of it in there, but I will say they're definitely using a lot more green screen in this film, and it shows. Like there's a lot of obvious the CGI and green screen in this film is a lot more obvious than the other two films. And yeah, I mean that's something where like it definitely doesn't hold up as well, but it's like it's who really gives a shit at the end of the day? Like I don't really care. There's some good MJ moments here. Actually, this is probably some of the best like actual interactions and dialogue with MJ, I think, in the whole trilogy. Like the dinner scene where he's going to propose is great. It's actually a pretty creative way to propose too. Like it's pretty creative. But Bruce Campbell's awesome, good comedy. The whole set design and like golden aesthetic of the place, I think, is great. And like when she's fired and like Peter doesn't even give her a chance to say that she's fired, or like when she comes back and she's upset because of the reviews and he has to leave her. So like the MJ interactions are a lot better. And this film overall has a lot of purely cinematic storytelling moments where like it's no dialogue and just with the images, like the way the image deceives us, where MJ walks out from being fired and we see the applause. Like if you froze that image, you would think they're applauding for her. And the image is misleading us because then we see the claps or the applause is for Spider-Man. And then we see her name being taken off the marquee. Like all that is perfect visual storytelling, no dialogue. So I think the MJ stuff is an upgrade. Aunt May's like the conscience of the film. Like I feel like she's the least present in this one. But I think, she's there as like really to ground like his conscience. The fact that she denied Uncle Ben's proposal, like I always remembered because for years that was the only time I ever heard of anyone like saying no to a proposal. So that always stood out to me, like even as a kid. And then of course the GOAT, J. Jonah Jameson, is hilarious. Where like here he has to repress his emotions, and like Betty Brant is getting all of this like passive aggressive revenge out on him. It's absolutely hilarious. And yeah, filmmaking, like there's definitely some good stuff. Like the air tracking action's great. Like I said, I think the script has a lot of flaws. I think there's a lot of times Sam Raimi as a director saves the flaws in the script. I don't think it's every scene, but I think a lot of them he does. There's cool stuff like when the punches, they delay the Venom reveal too much. Like as a kid, like we want to see Venom and we're waiting the whole movie to see Venom. And like he leaps towards the camera and we get the glimpse. And I just remember that being so disappointing. I'm like, you show us the character. Like we want to see Venom. And like they just delay it so much. But the scene where Sandman in the shadow like punches him down and then he pops up into the mid ground, I think that was awesome. And yeah, the score, I love the way the score, there's a new Venom theme or a black suit Spider-Man theme, and then he brings back the original theme when the actual suit comes back. And the score, like there's an epic opening feeling to the triumphant opening of the score, and then the what's it called? The transition into the black suit at nighttime with like the reflection, all that, like the score, everything about the transition there is incredible. The score, the sound design. In terms of sound design, he uses a lot of like people falling in slow motion where he cuts the score out and like the sound effects are heightened. He does that multiple times in here. But
I love moments when they do that.
Yeah, no, it does work well. The first Stan Lee talking cameo, which Stan Lee's just the GOAT. Gotta love Stan Lee. Now to real quick, some of the things I didn't love that I haven't mentioned. I think it takes too long.
I think we can just skip that section.
Yeah.
I do think the film takes too long to get going. Like I get that he has everything he wants in the beginning. I feel like they hold on that a little too long, where like you have so much shit you got to get through in this film, and they kind of take too long to get there. Which I rarely criticize in films, but this one I definitely feel it. And I mean, it's definitely the corniest by far. That's a matter of how you want to look at it as a comedy or if it's something that you're not crazy about. Nitpick thing, how does Dr. Connors know what a symbiote is? Like, it's an alien thing. How does he have any clue what that
Oh, a
is?
symbiote. It's a real medical thing, but I think he's a physicist, so it doesn't. I mean,
Maybe
it's
I
a bit
just
of a
don't know
stretch.
about
Or is he a
science.
biologist? Well, he's a physicist in the movie, but I guess he's a biologist since he like eventually turns himself into a lizard. But
I guess my
as an
big
actual
thing
character.
also is like with the Venom that they didn't do great is like the lighting in this movie I think is awful. Like you want to take it into like Peter Parker into a darker direction and like explore Venom, yet the lighting is always like so Hollywood bright. And I think like the jazz club scene is another one. Like the lighting is like you have all these colored lights, but all the faces are just always lit with like, oh, don't make the skin tones look like unnatural in any way that Hollywood always does.
That's a big Bill Pope thing. He loves adding shadows to his characters' faces. I really love it personally.
No, I'm saying I don't think he did enough with it. Like I think it's too.
Oh, I thought you were saying it was a bad thing. Oh, okay.
No, I'm saying I wish there was. That's what he like embraced that and leaned into that more. I think it's too like brightly lit, fully lit faces and like Hollywood bright is one of the, I think a weakness of the film. But overall, I still really enjoy the film. Like none of these flaws are enough to. Like the problem with knowing that a script is written is knowing what else they could have done to a degree, and like the Venom thing is the big thing for me. But it's especially knowing that the animated series did a better job with it. But overall, it's still an enjoyable film. It's not like a chore to watch. It's not really like do I really want to rewatch the regular? Like it's still an enjoyable film. So yeah. Does anyone else have anything to add?
Yeah. I do get the criticisms about the characters because it does get a bit messy, but it's not like TASM 2 bad where like the characters are genuinely like awfully designed and stuff like that. I think those characters are really awful. People often compare the two.
The Green Goblin in Tasm 2 is just
and Electro. People often compare the two because they both have kind of the same problems of having too many characters. People usually say, but I don't think they're really
I don't
comparable.
even think Tasm 2 is that bad. People,
it's better than one.
How bad it is.
It's not.
It's not. They're both around the same level, but it's not better.
I think 2 has more flaws, but 2 also has more like redeeming qualities. I think 1 is just so aggressively shit.
Oh yeah, I remember at the time people were just like, "This is a remake of Spider-Man 1." Like it wasn't. It's not seen now as where like it's just like another iteration of the character. It was like just seen as like a straight up remake, shot for shot, basically.
Speaking of that, though, I still remember. I will never forget. I remember exactly where I was in my Aunt Gabby's living room. The moment there was a newspaper on the table, and it just happened. I happened to like see it, and it caught my eye. Not even the headline, the small article that they're rebooting Spider-Man and Spider-Man 4 was canceled. I still remember the traumatic. I must have been like probably 10 years old, maybe. Yeah, I had to be around 10 years old, probably. I remember what a traumatic moment that was as a kid. Like knowing that it wasn't. And I still for years thought until I was like, I was probably out of high school and I found out that Carnage wasn't supposed to be the villain of 4. I guess that was like a lunchroom playground rumor that I thought was true. I thought for sure Carnage was the villain of 4. It turns out it was supposed to be the Lizard and Bruce Campbell as Mysterio, or maybe the Vulture. But like I thought
the
for
Vulture.
years it was supposed to be Carnage.
That would have been very cool.
I mean, there's hope that it's going to happen. It's
never happened. If
not...
it does, it'll be too Marvel down.
No, because I feel like Raimi still has the ability to. I mean, he's not going to take it on if it's not his movie. And I feel like even in something like Multiverse of Madness, where it was studio led, he still managed to shine through in that. And if he gets this 4th movie where it's his movie, I think he'll definitely be able to do it. But I'm not mad if they don't end up doing it because 3 is like it's accidental, but it is a great end to the trilogy. So
good. It is so good.
It's pretty calm compared to 1 and 2. Like it's such a calm ending.
It feels like a conclusion to the trilogy, and like it is going to be done. Obviously, it wasn't at the time. Like you said, Spider-Man 4 was going to get made, but it accidentally worked perfectly. I think at least.
One more thing I always noticed as a kid that felt weird, and they reuse it in No Way Home. How it's like, wait, so like there's all these people out in the fight, and the fight obviously doesn't take 5 hours, and then all of a sudden it's morning. So you're telling me this fight happened at like 3 a.m. and all these people were out and cameras, and then all of a sudden it's morning? that always stood out to me as a kid. They do it in No Way Home. Like it's not a real criticism, but like it always was like, wait, how is it morning now? Like, was that fight at 3 a.m.? Why are all these people out at 3 a.m.?
Yeah, I never realized that. It looks good though, so that looks good.
No, yeah, it's not a real criticism, but it's just it always stood out to me.
Yeah, I think like the end of him and Harry's arc is great at the end of that as well. The three of them against the sun, like you said, yeah, and then the jazz bar at the end where him and Mary Jane, hopefully, end up going into the married or something like that if we ever get Spider-Man 4. So yeah, I think it's a good ending.
Yeah, what villain would you want for Spider-Man 4?
I think it would be Vulture. It'd have to be. Sam Raimi commented on it recently that it would have to work for where Peter Parker is at that point in his life, which is a big time jump. So
I just hope Raimi, if he does, just completely ignores No Way Home, because that just.
Oh yeah, that'd be horrible.
If that has any change on Spider-Man 4, then I just wouldn't. I hope it doesn't, because I just want it to be the own thing.
It'll still be its own isolated thing.
But I just want to hope Spider-Man 4 forgets that No Way Home actually happens. I hope.
Yeah,
I don't think
no multiverse stuff.
Even if it maybe is like a line or two to throw away, but I don't think they're going to dwell on it at all.
Yeah, I agree. But we'll get there someday, I hope. I really hope.
All right. Thank you for watching. Comment down below. Let us know what's your favorite Spider-Man film, which villain is your favorite, and please like, subscribe, and most importantly, let my co-host know how dog shit the MJ scenes are. Thank you very much.